This is the thing that the Maccabeans spoke against the kingdoms of the Moabites and Medes. There was one man whose name was called Sirut Tsaiden, and who loved sin. He would boast in the abundance of his horses, and in the firmness of the troops beneath his authority. He had many priests, who served his idols, whom he worshipped, and to whom he bowed and sacrificed sacrifices by day and by daylight. But in the dullness of his heart, it would seem to him that they gave him firmness and power. And in his heart, it would seem to him that they gave him authority in all his realm. And again, in time of battle, it would also seem to him that they gave him all the desired authority. And he would sacrifice sacrifices for them day and night. He appointed priests who serve his idols. While they ate from that defiled sacrifice, they would tell him, pretending that the idols ate night and day. Again, they would make other persons diligent like unto them, that they might sacrifice sacrifices and eat. And again, they would make other persons diligent, that they might sacrifice sacrifices, and sacrifice sacrifices like unto them. And he would trust in his idols that don't profit nor benefit. By his time frame being small, and in his heart's dullness, it would seem to him that they created him, that they fed him, and that they crowned him. It would seem to him that they created him, for Satan had deafened his reasoning, lest he know his Savior, who created him, bringing from non-existence into existence, or lest he, with his kindreds, know his Creator, who created him, bringing from non-existence into existence, that they might go to the Gehenna of fire forever, it being judged against them, along with him who calls them gods, without their being gods. It is due that he might call them dead ones, for they are never well at any time. As Satan's authority that misleads them will lodge in that idol's image, and as he will tell them the accord of their reasonings, and as he will reveal to them like they wished, he will convict the idols wherein they believed, and wherein Adam's children trust, whose reasoning was like unto ashes. And they will marvel at the time they see that he fulfilled for them what they planned, and they will do his accord for him, reaching until they sacrifice their daughters and their sons, birthed from their natures, until they spill their daughters' and sons' blood that was clean. They didn't sadden them, for Satan has savored his sacrifice for them, to fulfill their evil accord, that he might lower them into Gehenna like unto him, where there are no exits until eternity, where he will receive tribulation. But that Sirut Tsaiden was arrogant. He had 50 idols worked in the pattern of males, and 20 worked in the pattern of women, and he would boast in those idols that have no benefit. He would totally glorify them while he sacrificed sacrifices morning and evening, and he would command persons that they might sacrifice sacrifices to the idols, and he would eat from that defiled sacrifice, and he would command other persons that they might eat from the sacrifice. He would especially provoke for evil. He had 5 houses worked for his beaten worked idols, that were iron and brass and lead, and he ornamented them in silver and gold. He veiled curtains around the houses for them, and planted a tent for them. He appointed keepers for them there. He would continually sacrifice 40 to his idols, 10 fattened oxen, 10 sterile cows, 10 fattened sheep ewes, 10 barren goats, with birds that have wings. But it would seem to him that his idols ate. he would present to them 50 firkins of grapes, and 50 dishes of wheat kneaded with oil. And he told his priests, "Take and give them. Let my creators eat what I slaughtered for them, and let them drink the grapes that I presented to them. As for if it isn't enough for them, I will add for them." And he would command everyone that they might eat and drink from that defiled sacrifice. But in his evil malice he would send his troops, who visit in all the kingdom, that as it were there was one who neither sacrificed nor bowed, that they might separate and know and bring him, and might punish him by fire and sword before him, that they might plunder his money, and might burn his house in fire, that they might destroy all his money he had on him. For they are kind and great ones, and they have created us in their charity. And I will show punishment and tribulation for him, unless he worshipped my creators, and sacrificed sacrifice for my creators. And I will show him punishment and tribulation, for they have created earth and heaven, and the wide sea, and the moon and the sun and stars, and rains and winds, and all that lives in this world, to be food, and to be satiety for us. But persons who worship them shall be punished in firm tribulation, and they won't be nice to them. There was one man born from the tribe of Benjamin, whose name was called Maccabias. He had 3 children who were handsome, and who were totally warriors. They had been beloved alongside all persons in that Midian and Media country. That was Tsaiden's rule. And like the king commanded them at the time he found them, "Don't you bow to Tsaiden's creators? Or don't you sacrifice sacrifices? But if you refuse, we will seize and take you to the king, and we will destroy all your money, like the king commanded." These youths, who were handsome, replied to him, saying, "As for him to whom we bow, there is our Father Creator, who created earth and heaven, and what is within it, and the sea, the moon and sun, and clouds and stars. He is the true Creator whom we worship, and in whom we believe." And these the king's youths were 4, and their servants who carried shields and spears were 100. And at the time they wished that they might seize these holy ones, they escaped from their hands, and there was none who touched them. As those youths were totally warriors in power, they went seizing shields and their spears. And there was one of them who strangled and killed panthers, and at that time he would strangle them like unto a chicken. And there was one of them who killed lions with one rock, or striking at one time with a stick. And there was one of them who killed 100 persons, striking in time of battle with one sword. And their name and their hunt was thus. It was called in all the countries of Babylon and Moab. And they were warriors in power, and they had a thing being beloved, and comeliness. And again the comeliness of their features was wondrous. However, because they worshipped the Lord and didn't fear death, it was the comeliness of their reasonings that surpassed all. And at the time they frightened the troops. There was none who was able to seize them. But they who were warriors escaped, proceeding to a lofty mountain. And those troops returned to the city, and shut the fortress gate. They terrorized the people, saying, "Unless you bring those warriors, the Maccabeans, we will burn your city in fire. We will send to the king and destroy your country." And at that time the country persons, rich and poor ones, and women and men, orphans and widows, everyone proceeded and shouted together, and they straightened their necks toward the mountains and shouted to them, saying, "Don't destroy us, and don't destroy our country on us." At that time they wept together and feared, arising from the Lord. Returning their faces eastward, and stretching forth their hands, they begged toward the Lord together. "Lord, should we refuse these men who demolished thy command and thy law?" Yet he believed in silver and gold, and in the stone and wood that a person's hands worked. "But we don't wish that we might hear the word of that criminal who didn't believe thy law," they said. "He makes himself like they also created him, when thou art the Creator who saves and kills. As for him, he is who spills a person's blood and eats a person's flesh. But we don't wish that we might see that criminal's face, nor hear his word," they said. "However, if thou commanded us, we will go to him, because we believe in thee. We will pass and give our bodies unto death." And at the time he said, "Sacrifice sacrifices to my creators," we won't hear that criminal's words. But we believe thee, Lord, who examines kidneys and reasonings, Creator of our fathers, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, who did thy will and lived firmly in thy law. Thou examine a person's reasonings, and help the sinner and the righteous one, and there is none hidden from thee, and who took refuge is revealed alongside thee. But we have no other Creator apart from thee. However, be power and firmness, and a shelter for us in this work that we are ruled for thee, that we might give our bodies unto death, because of thy glorified name. And at the time Israel entered into country of Egypt, thou heard Jacob's plea, and now, glorified God, we beg thee. And at that time the two men, whose features were quite handsome, were seen for them, standing before them. At the time fire swords, that frighten like unto lightning, came down, and cut their necks and killed them. At that time they arose, being well like unto formerly. The comeliness of their features became totally handsome, and they shone more than the sun, and became more handsome than formerly. Like you see before you these the Most High the Lord's slaves, Abia, Cilia, and Phentos, who died and arose. You have that you might likewise arise after you died, and your faces shall shine like unto the sun in the kingdom of heaven. And they went with those men, and received martyrdom there. At that time they begged, they praised, and they bowed to the Lord. Death didn't frighten them, and the king's punishment didn't frighten them. And they went to those youths. They became like unto the sheep that has no evil, yet they didn't frighten them. And at the time they reached them, they seized and beat them and bound and whipped them. And they delivered them to the king, and stood them before him. And the king answered them, saying, How won't you stubborn ones sacrifice sacrifices, and bow to my creators? Those brethren who were cleansed from sin, who were honored and chosen and joyful, and who shone like unto a jewel, whose value was wondrous, Selah, Abia, and Phentos, answered him in one word. They told that king who was a plague, As for us, we won't bow nor sacrifice to defiled idols, that have no knowledge nor reasoning. And again they told him, We won't bow to idols, that were silver and gold, that a person's hand worked, that were stone and wood, that have no reasoning nor soul nor knowledge, that don't benefit their friends, nor harm their enemies. And the king answered them, saying, Why do you do thus? And as they know who insults them and who wrongs them, why do you insult the glorified creators? They answered him, saying, as they are like unto a trifle alongside us. As for us, we will insult them, and won't glorify them. And the king answered them, saying, I will punish you like unto the measure of your works evil. I will destroy the comeliness of your features with whipping, and firm tribulation, and fire. And now, tell me whether you will give, or won't give, sacrifice to my creators. As for if this didn't happen, I will punish you by sword and by whipping. They answered him, saying, As for us, we won't sacrifice sacrifices, nor bow to defiled idols. And the king commanded them that they might beat them with a fat stick, and again that they might whip them with a whip, and after it that they might splinter them until their inner organs were seen. And after this they bound and made them while in a jailhouse, until he counseled with the intention to punish and kill them. Without niceness they took and bound them in firm imprisonment in prison. And they sat in prison 3 nights and 3 daylights. And after this 3rd day the king commanded that a proclamation speaker might go around, and that counselors and nobles, country elders and officials might be gathered. And at the time the king Sirut Tsaiden sat in square, he commanded that they might bring those honored ones, Selah and Abiah and Phentos. They stood before him, being wounded and bound. And the king told them, When you sat these 3 days, is there really the returning that you returned, or are you in your former evil? And those honored soldiers of the Lord answered him, saying, As for us, we who are disciplined won't agree that we might worship the idols filled of sin and evil that thou regard. And the criminal was vexed, and commanded that they might stand them up in a lofty place, and might renew their wounds. Their blood flowed upon earth. And again he commanded that they might burn them with a torch lamp, and might char their flesh. And his servants did like he commanded them. And those honored men told him, Thou who forgot the Lord's law, speak. Our reward shall abound in the measure whereby thou multiply our punishments. And again he commanded that they might bring and send upon them bears and tigers and lions, that were evil beasts, before they ate their food, that they might totally eat their flesh with their bones. And he commanded persons who keep the beasts, that they might send the beasts upon them. And they did like unto he commanded them, and they bound those honored martyrs' feet. And again they maliciously beat and bound them with tent stakes. And those beasts were flung over them while they roared. And at the time they reached the martyrs, they hailed and bowed to them. They returned to their keepers while they roared, and they frightened their keepers. They took them to the square until they delivered them before the king. And they killed 75 men from the criminals' army there. Many persons panicked, the one anguishing upon the one in fear, until the king quit his throne and fled, and they seized the beasts with difficulty, and took them to their lodging. The 2 brethren of Selah and Abiah and Phentos came, and released them from the imprisonment that they bound them, and told them, Come, let us flee, lest these skeptics and criminals find us. And those martyrs answered their brethren, saying, It isn't procedure that we might flee after we set up for testimony. As it were you had feared, go fleeing. And those younger brethren of theirs said, We will stand with you before the king, and if you die, we will die with you. And after this the king was on the balcony of his lordship hall, and he saw that these honored men were released, and that all 5 brethren stood together. Those chiefs who work and punish troops questioned that they were the brethren, and told the king. And the king was vexed, and shouted like unto a wilderness boar. And until the king counseled with intention to punish all the 5 brethren, he commanded that they might seize and add them in prison. They placed them in prison, binding in firm imprisonment, without niceness, with a hollow stalk. And the king Sirut Tsaiden said, "These youths who erred wearied me. What should these men's reasonings be firm? And the evil of their work is like unto the firmness of their power. If I say they return, they will make their reasonings evil. And I will bring the hardship upon them like unto the measure of the evil of their work. And I will burn their flesh in fire, that it might be charred ash. And upon that I will scatter the ashes of their flesh like unto dust on mountains." And after he spoke this, he waited 3 days, and commanded that they might bring those honored men. And at the time those honored men approached, he commanded that they might burn a fire within the great pit oven, and that they might add within it a work of malice, that flames the fire, and whereby they boil a pot, the fat and soap berries, sea foam and resin, and the sulphur. And at the time fire flamed in the pit, the messengers went to the king, when they said, "We did what thou commanded us. Send the men who will be added." And he commanded that they might receive and cast them into the fire pit. And the youths did like the king commanded them. And at the time those honored men entered into the fire, they gave their souls to the Lord. And when the persons who cast them saw, angels received and took their souls to the garden, where Isaac and Abraham and Jacob are, where joy and happiness are found. And at the time that criminal saw that they died, he commanded that they might burn their flesh in a fire, until it was ashes, and that they might scatter them in the wind. But the fire wasn't able to burn the corpse hair from the side of their corpses. And they sent them forth from the pit. And again they flamed fire over them, beginning from morning until evening. It didn't burn them. They said, "And now come, let us cast their corpses seaward." And they did like the king commanded them. They cast them upon the sea. Even if they cast them seaward, adding great stones and iron hearthstones, and a millstone whereby a donkey grinds by turning, there was no sinking that the sea sank them. As the Lord's spirit of support had lodged in them, they floated upon the sea, yet they didn't sink. It failed him to destroy them, by all the malice that was provoked upon them. As this death of theirs has made me weary more than their life, let me cast their corpses to beasts, that they might eat them. Yet what will I do? He said. And the youths did like he commanded them. Vultures and beasts didn't touch their corpses. Birds and vultures veiled them with their wings, from burning in the sun. And the 5 martyrs' corpses sat 14 days. And at the time they saw them, their bodies shone like unto the sun, and angels encircled their corpses, like light encircles the tent. He counseled counsel. He lacked any action, and after this he dug a grave, and buried the 5 martyrs' corpses. And when that king who forgot the Lord's law had reclined upon a bed at night, the 5 martyrs were seen for him standing before him at night, vexed, and seizing swords. As it had seemed to him that they entered his house at night in a crime. At the time he awoke from his slumber, he feared, and wished that he might flee from the bedchamber into the hall. And as it had seemed to him that they would kill him, it seeming that they committed some crime against him, he feared, and his knees trembled. Consequently he said, "My lords, what do you wish? As for me, what shall I do for you?" They answered him, saying, "Aren't we whom thou killed burning in a fire, and whom thou commanded that they might cast upon the sea. As the Lord has kept our bodies because we believed in him, it failed thee to destroy us. As a person who believed in him won't perish, make glory and praises due the Lord. And we who believed in him also weren't shamed by the tribulation. As I didn't know that a punishment like unto this will find me, what reward shall I give you? In the stead wherefore I did an evil thing against you. And now specify for me the reward I will give you, lest you take my body in death, and lest you lower my body into Sheol when I am in life. As I have wronged you, forgive me my sin, because it was the niceness of the law of your father the Lord, he told them. And those honored martyrs answered him, saying, In the stead wherefore thou did an evil thing against us, as for us, we won't pay thee an evil thing. As the Lord who brings hardship upon a soul, as for him who will pay thee hardship, there is the Lord. However, we were seen for thee, being revealed that we were well, for thy time frames being small, and because of the deafness of thy reasoning. As for it seeming to thee that thou killed us, thou prepared welfare for us. But thy idols priest, and thou wilt descend to Gehenna, where there are no exits forever. Woe to thy idols to whom thou bow, having quit bowing to the Lord, who created you when you were scorned like unto spit, and for you who worshipped them, and you don't know the Lord who created you, bringing from non-existence into existence. Aren't you who are seen like unto smoke today, and who will perish tomorrow? And the king answered them, saying, What will you command me that I might do for you all that you wished? It is to save thyself, lest thou enter the Gehenna of fire. Yet it isn't to save ourselves who teach thee. For your idols are silver and gold, stone and wood, that have no reasoning, nor knowledge of soul, and that a person's hand worked. But they don't kill, they don't save, they don't benefit their friends, they don't harm their enemies, they don't debase, they don't honor, they don't make wealthy, they don't impoverish. They mislead you by the authority of demons, who don't wish that the one from persons might be saved, yet they don't uproot nor plant. They especially don't wish that the persons like unto you might be saved from death, you dull-hearted ones, for whom they seem that they created you, when you are who worked them. As the authority of Satans and demons has lodged in them, they shall return a thing to you like you wished, that it might drown you within the sea of Gehenna. But thou, quit this error of thine, and let this also be our reward, and the stead wherefore we died, that we might benefit our souls by worshipping our Creator, the Lord, they told him. But he was alarmed, and would totally marvel. And as all five had been seen for him drawing their swords, he feared, and consequently he bowed to them. Hence I knew that after our dead ones, who were dust, died, they will really arise. As for me, only little had remained for me to die. After this they were hidden from before that king's face. From that day onward, that Sirut Tsaiden, who was totally arrogant, quit burning their corpses. He would be joyous in his idols, and in the error of his reasoning, for they had misled him many eras, and he misled many persons like unto him, until they quit following in worship the Lord who created them. Yet it wasn't only he who erred, and they would sacrifice their daughters and their sons to demons. Yet they worked a seducing and disturbance that was the accord of their reasoning, that their father Satan taught them, that he might make the seducing and disturbance that the Lord doesn't love. They marry their mothers, and they abuse their aunts and their sisters. They abuse their bodies while they work all that resembles this filthy work. As Satan has firmed up the reasoning of those crooked persons, they said, "We won't return." But that Tsaiden, who didn't know his Creator, was totally arrogant, and he would boast in his idols. If they say, "How will the Lord give the kingdom to the persons who don't know him in law and in worship?" they will totally return to him in repentance. As he tests them thus, it is because of this. But if they totally returned in repentance, he would love them, and he would keep their kingdom. But if they refuse, a fire will punish them in the fire of Gehenna forever. But it would be due a king to fear his Creator Lord, like unto the fame of his lordship, and it would be due a judge to be ruled for his Creator, while he judged goodly judgments, like unto the fame of his rule. And it would be due elders, and chiefs, and envoys, and petty kings, to be commanded for their Creator, like unto the measure of their lordship's abundance. As he is Lord of heaven and earth, who created all the creation, because there is no other Creator in heaven nor earth, who impoverishes and makes rich. He is who honors and debases. The one warrior from the 60 warriors was proud. The Lord made his body, beginning from his foot up to his head, to swell with 1 spoon of sulfur. He died in 1 plague. And again, Hiram, who built an iron bed, was proud, arising from the abundance of his powerfulness, and the Lord hid him in death. And Nebuchadnezzar was proud, saying, "There is no other king without me, and I am the Creator who makes the sun rise in this world." And he said thus, arising from the abundance of his arrogance. And the Lord separated him from persons, and sent him into a wilderness 7 years, and made his fortune with birds of heaven and beasts of the wilderness, until he knew that the Lord was who created him. And at the time he knew him in worship, he again returned him to his kingdom. Who is it who wasn't of earth, being boldly proud against the Lord who created him? How about who is it who demolished his law and his order, and whom earth didn't swallow? And thou, Sirut, love that thou might be proud against thy Creator. And again, thou have that he might destroy thee like unto them, and might lower thee into a grave, arising from thy arrogance. And again, after they entered into Sheol, where there is tooth grinding and mourning, that was the fulfillment of darkness, thou have that he might lower thee into the deep pit Gehenna, where there are no exits forever. As for thee, thou art a man who will die and be demolished tomorrow, like unto arrogant kings who were like unto thee, who quit the living of this world. As for us, we say, thou art demolished ruins, but thou art the Lord. For the Lord is who created earth and heaven and thee. He debases arrogant ones. He honors them who were debased. He gives firmness for persons who wearied. He kills well ones. He raises up the persons who were earth, who died, buried in a grave. And he sends slaves forth free in life, from the rulership of sin. O King Sirut, why do thou boast in thy defiled idols who have no benefit? But the Lord created heaven and earth and great seas. He created the moon and sun, and he prepared eras. Man grazes toward his field, and he whiles when he plows, until it dusks. And the stars of heaven live firmed up by his word. And he calls all in heaven. There is nothing done without the Lord knowing it. He commanded the angels of heaven that they might serve him, and might praise his glorified name. And angels are sent to all persons who inherit life. Raphael, who was a servant, was sent to Tobit, and he saved Tobias from death in Raguel's country. Holy Michael was sent to Gideon, that he might draw his attention with the intention that he destroy persons, and he was sent to the prophet Moses at the time he made Israel cross the Red Sea. As only the Lord had said, he led them. There was no different idol with them. And he sent them forth toward the crops upon earth, and he fed them his plantation grain. As he had totally loved them, he cherished them, feeding the honey that was firm like unto a rock. And that thou might totally keep his kindreds by what is due, and that thou might do the will of the Lord who created thee, he crowned thee, giving authority over the 4 kingdoms. For he has crowned thee, making loftier than all, and thy Creator totally crowned thee, that thou might love the Lord. And it is procedure that thou might love thy Creator, the Lord, like he loved thee, like he trusted thee over all the people. And thou do the will of the Lord, that thy eras might abound in this world, and that he might live with thee in support. And do the will of the Lord, that he might stand for thee, being a guardian against thy enemies, that he might seat thee upon thy throne, that he might hide thee in his wings of support. As for if thou don't know, the Lord chose and crowned thee over Israel, like he chose Saul from the children of Israel, when he kept his father's donkeys. And he crowned him over his kindreds, Israel. And he sat with Israel upon his throne. And he gave him a lofty fortune, separate from his kindreds. The Lord crowned thee over his kindreds. As for henceforth onward, behold, keep his kindreds. As the Lord has appointed thee over them, that thou might kill and might save, keep them in an evil thing, them who do a goodly thing, and them who work an evil thing upon a goodly thing, he told him. And as the Lord has appointed thee over all, that thou might do his will, be it while thou whipped, or while thou saved, pay them evil work, them who work goodly work, and them who work goodly work and evil work. For thou art a slave of the Lord, who rules all in heaven, and thou do the will of the Lord, that he might do thy accord for thee, in all thou thought, and in all thou begged, while thou wheedled before him. There is none who rules him, but he rules all. There is none who appoints him, but he appoints all. There is none who dismisses him, but he dismisses all. There is none who reproaches him, but he reproaches all. There is none who makes him diligent, but he makes all diligent. As the rulership of heaven and earth is for him, there is none who escapes from his authority. All is revealed alongside him. Yet there is none hidden from his face. He sees all, but there is none who sees him. He hears the prayer of the person who prays to him, saying, Save me. For he has created man in his pattern, and he accepts his plea. As he is a king who lives until the eternity, he feeds all from his unchanging nature. As he crowns in truth the kings who do his will, the kings wrote a straight thing because of him. As they have done the will of the Lord, he shall shine up in a light that isn't examined. The lodgings of Isaac and Abraham and Jacob, Solomon and David, and Hezekiah, in the garden where there are all beautiful kings, whose lodging was light. Heaven's hall is what totally shone. Yet halls of earth aren't like unto heaven's hall. Its floor, whose features are silver and gold and jewel features, is clean, and its features that totally shine are unexamined by a person's reasoning. Heaven's hall is what shines like unto jewels. Like the Lord, who is a nature knower, knew The heaven hall that he created is what a person's reasoning won't examine, and what shines in total light. Its floor, that was worked in silver and gold, jewels, white silk and blue silk, is clean. It is quite totally beautiful, like unto this. Righteous ones who were firm in religion and virtue are who shall inherit it in the Lord's charity and for pardon. And there is water of well-being that flows from it, and it totally shines like unto the sun, and there is a tent of light within it, and it is encircled by a graceful perfume. A garden fruit that was beautiful and beloved, whose features and tastes were different, is around the house, and there is an oil and grape placed there, and it is totally beautiful, and the fragrance of its fruit is sweet. When a flesh and blood person enters into it, his soul would have separated from his flesh, from the abundance of joy and happiness that is in it, arising from the flavor of its fragrance. Beautiful kings who did the will of the Lord shall be joyful there. Their honor and their place is known in the kingdom of heaven, that lives firmed up forever, where well-being is found. He showed that their lordship upon earth was famed and honored, and that their lordship in heaven was famed and honored. They shall be honored and lofty in heaven, like they honor them, and bow to them in this world. If they work goodly work in this world, they shall be joyful. But kings who were evil in their rule and in their kingdoms, that Lord gave them, they don't judge in truth by what is due. As they have ignored the sufferers' and poor ones' cries, they don't judge truth and save the refugee and the wrong child whose father and mother died on him. They don't save sufferers and poor ones from the hand of the wealthy that robs them. They don't divide and give their food and satisfy them who hungered, and they don't divide and give from their drink and give drink for the persons who thirsted, and they don't return their ears to the poor one's cry. And he shall take them to Gehenna, that was a dark ending. At that time, that lofty day arrived on them, when the Lord shall come, and at the time his wrath is done against them. Like David spoke in his praises, Lord, don't chastise me in thy judgment, and don't admonish me in thy chastisement. Their problems and their debasement shall abound, like unto the measure of the abundance of their fame. When nobles and kings are who rule this world, in this world, there are persons who didn't keep thy law. But the Lord, who rules all, is there in heaven. All persons' souls and all persons' welfare have been seized by his authority. He is who gives honor to persons who glorify him, for he totally rules all, and he loves the persons who love him. As he is Lord of earth and heaven, he examines and knows what kidneys transported, and what a reasoning thought. And for a person who begged to him with a pure reasoning, he shall give him his plea's reward. He shall destroy the arrogance of powerful ones, who work evil works against the child whose mother and father died on him, and against widows. It isn't by thy power that thou seized this kingdom. It isn't by thy being able that thou sat upon this throne. He wished to test thee thus, that it be possible for thee to rule like unto Saul, who ruled his kingdoms in that season. And he seated thee upon a kingdom throne. Yet it isn't by thy power that thou seized this kingdom. It is when he tests thee, like unto Saul, who ignored the prophet Samuel's word and the Lord's word, and served neither his army nor the king of Amalek. Yet it isn't by thy being able that thou seized this kingdom. And the Lord told the prophet Samuel, Go, and as they have saddened me by demolishing the law, and worshipping the idols, and bowing for the idols, and by their mosques, and by all their hated works without benefit. Tell Saul, go to Amalek country and destroy their enemies, and all the kings, beginning with persons up until livestock. Consequently, he sent Saul against them, who saddened the Lord, that he might destroy them. But he saved their king from death, and he saved many livestock, and beauties and women, and handsome youth from death. As he had scorned my thing, and as he didn't hear my command because of this thing, the Lord told the prophet Samuel, go and divide his kingdom. In his stead, anoint Jesse's son, David, that he might reign over Israel. But upon him adjourn a demon, who will strangle and cast him, as he has refused, if I gave him a kingdom that he might do my will. At the time he refused me to do my will, I dismissed him from his kingdom that was due him. But thou, go and tell him, saying, wilt thou thus ignore the Lord, who crowned thee over his kindred's Israel, who seated thee upon his lordship throne? But thou tell him, thou didn't know the Lord, who gave around this much honor and fameness. He told him. And the prophet Samuel went to King Saul, and entered before him, seated at a dinner table, and when the king Amalek, Agag, had sat on his left. Why did thou totally ignore the Lord, who commanded thee that thou might destroy the livestock and persons? He told him. And at that time the king feared and arose from his throne, and telling Samuel, return for us, he seized his clothes, and Samuel refused to return. Samuel's clothes were torn. And Samuel told Saul, the Lord divided thy kingdom. And again Saul told Samuel before the people, honor me and atone my sin for me before the Lord, that he might forgive me. And Samuel refused to return in his word, for he had feared the word of the Lord who created him. But he didn't fear the king who died. Consequently, he pierced Amalek's king, Agag, before he swallowed what he chewed. And a demon seized that Saul, who demolished the law of the Lord, and because he is the King of kings who rules all, the Lord struck on his head a king who worked sin, for it didn't shame him. For he is Lord of all the creation, who dismisses the authority of all the nobles and kings who don't fear him. But there is none who rules him. Like he spoke, saying, David's kindred shall go while it was famed and honored, but Saul's kindred shall go while it was debased. He destroyed a kingdom from Saul's children and from him. Because it saddened him, and because he destroyed the criminals who saddened him with their evil works, the Lord revenged and destroyed Saul's kindred children. For a person who doesn't revenge the Lord's enemy, he is the Lord's enemy, when it is possible for him to revenge and destroy. And when he has authority, a person who doesn't revenge and destroy the sinner, and doesn't revenge and destroy a person who won't keep the Lord's law, as he is the Lord's enemy. He destroyed Saul's kindred children. And whether thou be a king or a ruler, what important thing art thou? Isn't it the Lord who created thee, bringing from non-existence into existence, that thou might do his will, and might live firmed up by his command, and might fear his judgment? Like thou art vexed against thy slaves, and governed over them, all likewise there is also the Lord, who is vexed against thee, and governs over thee. Like thou beat without niceness persons who work sin, all likewise there is also the Lord, who will strike thee and lower thee into Gehenna, where there are no exits unto eternity. Like thou whip him who wasn't ruled for thee, and didn't bring tribute for thee. For what is it that thou don't introduce tribute for the Lord, as he is who created thee, in order that thou wish that they might fear thee, and who crowned thee over all the creation, that thou might keep his kindreds in truth? For what is it that thou don't fear thy Creator the Lord? Judge by what is due and in truth, like the Lord appointed thee, yet don't see a face and favor, for small nor great. Whom wilt thou fear without him? Keep his worship and the 9 commands. Like Moses commanded the children of Israel, saying, I presented water and fire for thee. Add thy hand into what thou loved. Go neither rightward nor leftward. Hear his word that I tell thee, that thou might hear his word, and might do his command, lest thou say, It is beyond the sea, or beyond the deep, or beyond the river. Who will bring to me that I might see it, and might hear his word, and might do his command? Lest thou say, Who will proceed to heaven again, and lower that word of the Lord to me, that I might hear and do it? The word of the Lord is what approached. Lo, for thou to teach it with thy mouth, and give alms by it with thy hand. And thou didn't hear thy Creator the Lord, unless thou heard his book, and thou didn't love him, nor keep his command, unless thou keep his law. And thou have that thou might enter into Gehenna forever, and unless thou love his command, and unless thou did the will of the Lord, who honored and famed thee separate from all thy kindreds, that thou might keep them in truth. Thou have that thou might enter into Gehenna forever. He made thee above all, and he crowned thee over all his kindreds, that thou might rule his kindreds in truth by what is due, while thou thought of the name of thy Creator, who created thee and gave thee a kingdom. There are none whom thou whip from persons who wrong thee, and there is him who thou pardon, while thou thought of the Lord's work, and there is him for whom thou judge by what is due, straightening up thy reasoning. And don't favor having seen a face at the time they argued before thee. As earth's physique is thy money, don't accept a bribe that thou might pardon the sinner and wrong the clean person. If thou did his will, the Lord shall multiply thy eras in this world for thee. But if thou sadden him, he will diminish thy eras. Think that thou will rise after thou died, and that thou will be examined, standing before him, upon all the work thou worked, whether it be goodly or evil. If thou work goodly work, thou wilt live in the garden in the kingdom of heaven, in houses where kind kings live, and where light filled. For the Lord doesn't shame thy lordship's authority. But if thou work evil work, thou wilt live in Sheol, Gehenna, where evil kings live. But at the time thou sees the fameness of thy being feared, thy warriors' awards, thy hanging shield and spear, and at the time thou see thy horses and thy troops beneath thy authority, and them who beat drums, and persons who play upon a harp before thee. But at the time thou see all this, thou make thy reasoning lofty, and thou firm up thy collar of reasoning, and thou don't think of the Lord who gave thee all this honor. However, at the time he told thee, Quit all this, thou art who quit it. For thou have totally neglected the appointment he appointed thee, and he shall give thy lordship to another. As death shall suddenly come upon thee, and as judgment shall be done in the time of resurrection, and as all of man's works shall be examined, he shall totally investigate and judge upon thee. There is none who will honor the kings of this world, for because he is a judge of truth, at judgment time, the poor and wealthy will stand together. The crowns wherein the nobles of this world boast shall fall. Judgment is prepared, and souls shall quake. At the time the work of sinners and righteous ones shall be examined, and there is none who shall be hidden. At the time a woman arrived for birthing, and at the time the fetus in her belly arrived for being birthed. Like she cannot prevent her womb, earth also cannot prevent, and will return, her lodgers that are upon her. And like clouds can't prevent rain, so that they don't take and rain towards the earth that the Lord commanded them. For the Lord's word has created all, bringing from non-existence into existence, and again the Lord's word has introduced all into the grave. All likewise, after resurrection time arrived, it isn't possible to be that dead persons won't arise. Like Moses spoke, saying, "It is by words that proceed from the Lord's tongue," yet it isn't only by grain that a person is saved. Again also, the Lord's word shall arouse all persons from graves. Behold, it was known that dead persons shall arise by the Lord's word. And again, the Lord said thus in Deuteronomy, concerning persons who were nobles and kings, who do his will. As the day has arrived, when they are counted for destruction, I shall revenge and destroy them on the day when judgment is judged, and at the time when their feet stumble, he said. And again, the Lord told persons who know his judgment, Know, that I am your Creator, the Lord, and that I kill and I save. I chastise in the tribulation, and I pardon. I lower into Sheol, and again I send forth to the garden, and there is none who shall escape from my authority, he told them. The Lord said thus concerning nobles and kings who didn't keep his law. As earthly kingdoms are a transition, and as they pass from morning unto evening, keep my order and my law, that thou might enter into the kingdom of heaven that lives firm forever, he said. For the Lord's calling of righteous ones is for honor, and for sinners for tribulation. He will make the sinner wretched, but will honor righteous ones. He will dismiss the person who didn't do his will, but he will appoint the person who did his will. Hear me. Let me tell thee the thing whereby dead persons shall arise. They shall plant plants and be fertile, and grapes shall send forth vines. As the Lord shall bring the fruit imhiba albo, they shall cast wine from it. Understand that the plant thou planted was small, but that it sends forth tips, fruit, and leaves today. The Lord lets its root drink from earth and water, from both, but he feeds its wood with fire and wind. Roots give leaves, water to drink, and earth gives firmness to woods. But the soul that the Lord created causes them to bear fruit in their midst, and dead persons arising is likewise. At the time a soul was separated from flesh, he said, Gather souls from the four natures, from earth and water, wind and fire. For each of themselves had gone. But earth's nature lived firmly in her nature, and became earth. And water's nature lived firmly in her nature, and became water. And wind's nature lived firmly in her nature, and became wind. And fire's nature lived firmly in her nature, and became a hot fire. But a soul that the Lord separated from flesh returned to its Creator, until he raises it up, united with flesh at the time he wished. He places it in the garden, in the place he wished. He places righteous souls in a house of light in the garden. But that he might send away sinners' souls, he also places them in a house of darkness, in Sheol, until the time when he wished. The Lord told the prophet Ezekiel, Call souls from the four corners, that they might be gathered and become one limb. At the time he spoke in one word, saying thus, The souls were gathered from the four corners. And water's nature brought verdure, and again, fire's nature brought fire, and again, earth's nature brought earth, and wind's nature brought wind. And the Lord brought a soul from the garden place where he had placed it. They were gathered by one word, and a resurrection was made. And again I shall show thee the example that is alongside thee. The day dusks, thou sleep. The night dawns, and thou arise from thy bedding. But at the time thou slept, it is an example of thy death. And at the time thou awoke, it is an example of thy arising. But the night, when all persons sleep, whose physiques were dark, for darkness has covered them, is an example of this world. But the morning light, when darkness is eliminated, and when light is in all the world, and when persons arise and graze toward the field, it is an example of dead persons. And this kingdom of heaven, where man is renewed, is like unto this. The resurrection of dead persons is like unto this. As this world is transient, it is an example of the night. And like David spoke, saying, He placed his example in the sun, as the sun shines at the time it rose. It is an example of the kingdom of heaven. And like the sun shines in this world today, as the time Christ comes, he shall shine like unto the sun in the kingdom of heaven that is new. As he has said, I am a sun that doesn't set, and a torch that isn't extinguished. He, the Lord, is its light. And he shall quickly arouse the dead persons again. I shall bring one example for thee again, from thy food that thou sow, and whereby thou art saved, and whether it be a wheat kernel, or a barley kernel, or a lentil kernel, or all man's seeds sown upon earth, there is none that grows, unless it were demolished and rotten. And like unto persons' flesh that thou see, at the time it was demolished and rotten. Earth eats the stoutness with the hide. And at the time earth eats its stoutness, it grows, being about 1/7 of a kernel. The Lord gives a cloud that seized rain like he wished, and roots grow upon earth and send forth leaves. And if it was demolished and rotten, it can't grow. But after it grew, it sent forth many buds. And by will of the Lord, fruit is given for those buds that grew, and he clothes its stoutness in straw. See, like unto the measure that the seed kernels thou sowed abounded, yet the silver and the leaf, the ear and the straw aren't numbered for thee. Don't be a dull one who doesn't know, and see thy seed, that it abounded. And all likewise think that dead persons shall receive the arising that they will arise, and their hardship like unto their works. Hear me, that if thou sow wheat, it won't grow being barley, nor being wheat if thou sow barley. And let me tell thee again, that it won't grow. If thou sow wheat, will thou gather barley? If thou sow watercress, will thou gather linseed? How about from plant kinds? If thou plant figs, will it really grow for thee being nuts? How about if thou plant almonds? Will it really grow for thee being grapes? If thou plant the sweet fruit, will it grow for thee being bitter? How about if thou plant the bitter fruit? Is it possible for it to be sweet? How about all likewise, if a sinner dies, is it possible to arise being righteous in resurrection time? How about if a righteous person dies, is it possible to arise being a sinner in resurrection time? Every one shall receive his hardship like unto his work, yet he will receive his hardship like unto his sin, and the work of his hands. Yet there is none who will be convicted by his companion's sin. A highland tree is planted, and it sends forth long branches. It will totally dry up, yet unless heaven rained rain, its leaves won't be verdant. And the cedar will be uprooted from its roots, unless summer rains alight upon it. And all likewise, dead persons won't arise, unless dew of well-being alights for them, being commanded from the Lord. Unless highland mountains and the regions of Gilboa rain rains of forgiveness for them, being commanded from the Lord, they won't grow grass for beasts and animals. And mountains of Elam and the mountains of Gilead won't give verdant leaves for sheep and goats, nor for Orabi and animals in the wilderness, nor for ibexes and hartebeest. And likewise, pardon and due, being commanded from the Lord, didn't alight for skeptics and criminals, who made error and crime a currency beforehand. Dead persons won't arise. And Demas and Cyprus, who worship idols and dig roots, and work and instigate a thing, and they who dig roots and practice sorcery, and make persons battle, and they who lust, having departed from the Lord, and persons of Media and Athens, who believe in their idols, and they who play and sing for them, while they played violins and drums, and strummed harps, they won't arise, unless dew of pardon alights for them, being commanded from the Lord. These are who will be convicted on the day when dead persons arise, and when definite judgment is done. Yet persons who save themselves, and who lust in the work of their hands, they err by their idols. Thou wasteful of heart, dull one, does it seem to thee that dead persons won't arise? At the time a trumpet was blown, by the tongue of the angels chief, holy Michael, that dead ones arise then. As thou won't remain in a grave without arising, don't think a thing that is thus. Hills and mountains shall be level, and shall be a cleared path, and resurrection shall be done for all fleshly ones. However, if it wasn't thus, it is that former persons might be buried in their fathers' graves, beginning from Adam, beginning from Seth and Abel, Shem and Noah, Isaac and Abraham, Joseph and Jacob, and Aaron and Moses. Yet for what is it that they didn't wish that they might be buried in another place? Isn't it for them to arise together with their relatives in resurrection time? How about, isn't it lest their bones be counted with bones of evil ones and pagans, they who worship idols? For what is it that they didn't wish that they might be buried in another place? But thou, don't mislead thy reasoning, while thou said, how will dead persons arise if they died, they who were buried in one grave, being tens of thousands, and whose bodies were demolished and rotten? And at the time thou look to a grave, thou speak this in the dullness of thy reasoning, while thou said, a whole fistful of earth won't be found. How will dead persons arise? Wilt thou say the seed that thou sowed won't grow? Even the seed thou sowed shall grow, and all likewise, the souls the Lord sowed, shall quickly arise, as he has created man in his truth, bringing from non-existence into existence. He shall arouse them quickly by his word that saves. He won't delay his arousing, and as he has again returned him from living into a grave in death, what about, isn't it possible for him again to return from death to life? Saving and lifting up are possible for the Lord. Armon perished, and its fortress was demolished. As the Lord has brought the hardship upon them, like unto their evil and their works they worked with their hands, persons who worship the idols in Edom and Zebulun shall be debased at that time. As the Lord has approached, who shall convict them who worked in their infancy, and didn't quit until they aged? Sidon and Tyre shall weep because of their idols and their evil, because they worked sin and seducing fornication and worshipped idols. Because of this thing, the Lord shall revenge and destroy them, for they didn't live firmed up in the command of their Creator, the Lord. And Judah's daughters shall be wretched. Jerusalem lived firmly in killing prophets, and in joy and happiness. Yet as she didn't live firmly in the 9 laws and the worship, at the time when dead ones arise, her sin shall be revealed. At the time the Lord shall examine her in the wisdom of his nature. He will revenge and destroy her on all her sins that she worked in her era of infancy. She didn't quit working her sin, beginning from her era of beauty up until she aged. She entered into a grave and became dust, like unto her former fathers, who lived firmly in their sins, and in resurrection time he shall revenge and destroy persons who demolished the Lord's law. It shall be judged against them, for Moses has spoken concerning them, saying, Their law lodgings, their reasonings became law lodgings of Sodom. And their kindred is Gomorrah's kindred, and their law is what destroys, and their works are evil. And their law is snake poison that destroys, and viper poison that destroys from alongside that. Jerusalem, child, as this thy sin is like unto the sin of Gomorrah and Sodom. Jerusalem, child, this is thy tribulation that was spoken by a prophet. And thy tribulation is like unto the tribulation of Gomorrah and Sodom. And the reasoning of their law lodging was firm in adultery and arrogance. Aside from the reins of adultery and arrogance, the reins of pardon and humility didn't reign from their reasonings, with the intention that the lodging of their law reasonings be fertile, apart from spilling man's blood and robbing and forgetting their Creator the Lord. And they didn't know their Creator the Lord, apart from their evil work and their idols. And they are joyous in their work of their hands, and they lust upon males and upon livestock. As their eye of reasoning has been blinded, lest they see secrets, and as their ears have deafened, lest they hear and do the Lord's will that he loves. They didn't know the Lord in their works, and their reasonings are like unto the law lodging of Sodom, and their kindred, Gomorrah's grapes kindred, that bears sweet fruit. And if they examine their work, it is a poison that kills, for it has become firm in a curse, beginning from the day when it was worked, and its foundation has been in the era of destruction, as their law lodgings, their reasonings, have become firm in works of sin, as their bodies have become firm in Satan's burning work to build sin. Their law lodgings, their reasonings, never have any goodly work. And at the time he is ashamed, and is baptized by one who is guided, it is for chastisement and destruction, and he will make firm the persons who drank, and their reasonings, and he will make them who destroy me, disgusting persons, who distanced from the Lord. For they have lived firmly in their works that were evil, and he will make them a lodging for diabolos. And eating what was sacrificed to idols has been begun in the house of Israel, and she proceeds to the mountains and the trees. And she worships the idols that people in her area worship, and her daughters and her sons for demons, who don't know goodly work separate from evil. And they spill clean blood. They gush and spill grape wine from Sodom for the idols forever. And she glorifies and worships the Dagon that Eliphaz worship. And she sacrificed to him from her flocks and her fattened cows, that she might be joyous in the laziness of demons, that they taught her to sacrifice to them, and in their gushing and spilling the grape wine, and that she might do their will. She sacrifices to him, that she might be joyous in the laziness of demons, that they taught her, lest she know her Creator the Lord, who feeds her at each time, and who cherished and raised her, beginning from her infancy, until her beauty, and again until she ages, and again up to her day of age when she dies. And again I shall revenge, and convict him in resurrection time. And as she didn't return to my law, and as she didn't live firmly in my commands, her time when she lives in Gehenna shall be until eternity. If they were creators in truth, let her idols arise with her, and descend into Gehenna and save her, at the time I was vexed and destroyed her, and at the time I distanced all the priests of the idols who lust with her. Like she made sin, and insults against the holy items, and against lodging, the temple. I made her wretched by all this. When they told her, Behold, this is the Lord's kindred, and she is the lodging of Israel's Creator the Lord, and the famous king's country, Jerusalem, who was separate from them who were separate. She is the lodging of the Most High, the Lord's name. I made her wretched, like she Tsaiden by name that was called in her. She boasts in me that she was my slave, and that I was her Lord. She winks on me like unto a criminal, yet she isn't one who fears me, and does my will like unto my being her Lord. They became an obstacle upon her, to mislead, that they might distance her from me. Yet she is ruled for other idols, who don't feed her nor clothe her. She sacrifices to them, and she eats the sacrifice, and she spills blood for them, and she gushes and drinks from the grape wine for them. She smokes incense for them, and she causes the incense fragrance to smell for them. Her idols command her, and she is commanded for them. And again she sacrifices her daughters and her sons to them, and as she presents praises to them because of their love, she is joyous in the things she spoke with her tongue, and in the work of her hands. Woe to her on the day when definite judgment is done, and woe to her idols, whom she loves and unites. And she shall descend with them into Gehenna, beneath Sheol, where the worm doesn't slumber, and the fire isn't extinguished. Woe to thee, wretched Jerusalem, child, for thou have quit me, who created thee, and have worshipped different idols. And I shall bring the hardship upon thee like unto thy work, as thou have saddened me, and as thou have ignored my word, and as thou didn't work goodly work, I shall convict thee to thy pretensions. For thou hast saddened my word, and thou didn't live firmed up in my law, whereby thou swore with me, that thou might keep my law, and that I might live with thee in support, and might save thee from all who fight thee, and also that thou might keep my order that I commanded thee. And I shall ignore thee, and won't quickly save thee from the tribulation. Thou didn't keep all this, and I ignored thee, as I have created thee, and as thou didn't keep my command nor my word, I shall convict thee in the time of judgment. And I honored thee that thou might be my kin. And like Gomorrah and Sodom were separated from me, thou wert separated from me. And I judged and destroyed them. And like Sodom and Gomorrah were separated from me, thou separated from me. And now, like I was vexed and destroyed them, I was vexed and destroyed thee. As thou art from the kindred of Sodom and Gomorrah, whom I destroyed thee. As them, who I created, have saddened me, by going to a youth's wife, and by lusting without law, with animals and males like unto arriving with women, I destroyed the invocation of their names from this world, lest they live in their happiness and joy. There is no fearing the Lord in their faces, beginning from an infant up to an elder. They help him in all their evil work, yet he isn't vexed against each one, that they might quit working it. As their work is evil, they are satisfied of sin and iniquity. All evil works, robbery and arrogance and greed, are prepared in their reasoning. And consequently, the Lord ignored them and destroyed their countries, and they are there that he might burn them with fire, until their root foundations perish. They totally perished until the eternity, yet he didn't make even one of them remain. As they have become firm in sin, they shall wait in destruction forever, until the day of Advent, when definite judgment is done, for they have saddened me with their evil works, and I won't pardon them nor forgive them, and I ignored them. For thou won't find a pretext at the time I was vexed and seized thee, because all their works were robbery and sin, adultery and greed, and speaking lies, all error works, and obstacles that I don't love. And thou, Jerusalem child, who were wretched, on the day when judgment is done, thou wilt be seized in judgment like unto them. I made thee for honor, but thou debased thyself. I called thee my money, but thou became for another. I betrothed thee for honor, but thou became for diabolos, and I shall revenge and destroy thee like unto thy evil work. Because thou didn't hear all my words, because thou didn't keep the command I commanded thee at the time I loved thee, I shall multiply and bring firm vengeance upon thee, for I am the Lord who created thee, and I shall judge against all sinners like unto thee. And on the day when judgment is done, I shall bring the hardship upon them like unto their evil work. As thou didn't keep my word, and as thou have ignored my judgment, I shall convict thee with them. Woe to you, Gomorrah and Sodom, who have no fearing the Lord in your reasonings. All likewise, woe to thy Jerusalem child, against whom it shall be judged together with thee in the fire of Gehenna, for you will descend together into Gehenna that was prepared for you, where there are no exits forever. And woe to all sinners who work thy sin, as you didn't keep my command nor my word. Thou and she who didn't keep my command nor my word shall descend into Sheol together on the day when judgment is judged. But kind persons who kept my command and my word shall eat the money that sinners accumulated. And like the Lord commanded, kind persons shall share the loot that evil persons captured, and kind persons shall be totally joyful. But wrongdoers and sinners shall weep, and they shall be sad because of all their sin that they wronged, having departed from my command. He who keeps my word and lives firmed up in my command, he is who finds my blessing and is honored alongside me. All persons who keep my word and live firmed up in my command shall eat the fatness found from earth, and shall live having entered into the garden, where enter kind kings who have straight reasonings. As they shall be wretched and perish by my wrath at the time I seize them, woe to the regions of Tyre and Sidon, and all Judah country, who make themselves arrogant today. Conquering the Lord said thus, He has said, Diabolos' child, who is totally arrogant, shall be born from them, the false Messiah who, for a thing of truth, is its enemy, who firms up his collar of reasoning, who boasts and doesn't know his Creator. And he said, Woe to them. And the Lord who rules all said, I made him for the pattern of my anger, that I might be revealed in his power. And this Capernaum, and Samaria, and Galilee, and Damascus, and Syria, and Achaia, and Cyprus, and all the regions of Jordan, are kindreds who made firm their collars of reasoning, who lived firmly in their sin, and whom death's shadow and darkness covered. For Diabolos has covered their reasonings in sin, and they are commanded for that arrogant Diabolos, and they didn't return to fearing the Lord. At that time, woe to persons who are commanded for demons, and who sacrifice sacrifices to them in their name. As they have denied the Lord who created them, they resemble animals without minds. For the false Messiah, who forgot the Lord's law, and is a child of Diabolos, shall set up his image in all the places, for he has said, I am a god. And he shall be joyous in the will of his reasoning, in the work of his hands, and in robbery, and all the sins and perfidy and iniquity, in robbery, and all the adulteries that a person works. For because it was counted alongside the Lord that he shall work this, the era is known that they work sin. The sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall be blood, and stars shall be shaken from heaven. And all the work shall pass by the miracles that the Lord shall bring in the era of fulfillment, that he might make earth pass, and that he might make all pass who live in the sins of persons who live within her. As the Lord has been proud by the creation he created, and as he has quickly made all he wished in 1 hour, the Lord's death shall destroy a small enemy, Diabolos. For the Lord who rules all has said, I shall judge and destroy. But after Advent, Diabolos has no authority. And on the day when he was seized by my anger, he shall descend into Gehenna, for which he makes application, and where firm tribulation is, as he will take all who are with him to chastisement and destruction and perfidy, because I am who sends forth from Gehenna, and who introduces into Gehenna, he will descend into Gehenna. As he gives firmness and power to weak persons, and again as he gives weakness to powerful and firm persons, let a powerful one not boast in his power. As he is a ruler, and as he judges and saves the wronged persons from the hands of persons who wrong them, he will return the grudge of the widows and the orphans. Woe to thee who boast and make firm thy collar of reasoning, for whom it seems that I won't rule thee, nor judge and destroy thee. For in his boasting and his arrogance he has said, I will stretch my throne in the stars and heaven, and I will be like unto the Lord who is lofty. And like he spoke, saying, How Diabolos fell from heaven, he who shines like unto a morning star that was created preceding all. Woe to thee! And thou dared and spoke this in thy arrogance, and thou didn't think of the Lord who totally created thee by his authority. Why did thou boast thyself, that thou descend into Gehenna, and the firmness of thy reasoning? Thou wert debased separate from all angels like unto thee. For they praised their Creator with a humbled reasoning, because they knew that he was who created them from fire and wind, and they don't depart from his command. And they keep their reasonings from perfidy, lest they totally depart from his command. But thou did affirm perfidy in the arrogance of thy reasoning. Thou became a wretched man, separate from thy companions. For thou hast cherished all the sin and iniquity, robbery and perfidy, wherein persons who forgot the Lord's law, and sinners like unto thee, firmly live, they who are from thy kindred, and who commit crimes like unto thee, and who live firmly by thy command and thy will, whereby thou teach sin. Woe to thee, for the demons thou misled in thy malice, and thou wilt descend into Gehenna together. O you, the Lord children, who erred by that misleading criminal Diabolos, woe to you! As you have erred like unto him, in the intention that he taught you, and that his hosts taught you, you will descend into Gehenna together, where there are no exits forever. And formerly, when the Lord's slave Moses was there, you saddened the Lord by the water where arguments were made, and upon Horeb, and by Amalek, and upon Mount Sinai. And moreover, at the time you sent scouts toward Canaan, at the time they told you this, saying, The path is distant, and their ramparts, and their fortresses that reach up to heaven are firm, and warriors live there. You were vexed that you might return to the country of Egypt, where you had worked wearisome work, and you saddened the Lord's word. You didn't think of the Lord, who made you firm from the tribulation, and who did great miracles in Egypt, and who led you into the authority of his angel. He would veil you in a cloud by day, lest the sun burn you, and he would shine a column of fire for you by night, lest your feet stumble in darkness. And at the time the army and Pharaoh frightened you, you totally cried to Moses, and Moses totally cried to the Lord, and he lodged in his angel and kept you, lest you meet with Pharaoh. But he introduced them into the Red Sea in tribulation. The Lord led only Israel, for he had said, and there was no different idol with them. But he buried their enemies in the sea at one time, and he didn't preserve any of them who fled. And he made Israel cross amidst the sea on foot. There was no tribulation that found them arising from the Egyptians. Him delivered them to Mount Sinai, and there he fed them manna 40 eras. As the children of Israel always saddened the Lord, he did all these goodly things for them, and they neglected to worship the Lord. They placed evil in their reasonings, beginning from their childhood until their old age. For the Lord's mouth has spoken thus in the Torah, where the births of the fathers was written, as he has spoken, saying, The reasoning of Adam's children is ashes, and all their work is toward robbery, and they run to evil. There is none of them who loves straight work, apart from gathering a person's money in violence, and swearing in a lie, and wronging companions, and robbing and stealing. They placed evil in their reasonings, and all go toward evil works in the era when they live in life. The children of Israel who demolished the Lord's law totally saddened the Lord, beginning from antiquity until the era of fulfillment. And at the time the Lord destroyed Cain's children, Kidrons, who proceeded in destruction water because of their sin. He baptized earth in the water of destruction, and he cleansed her from all the sin of Cain's children. As he has said, I was sad because I created man. He destroyed all wrongdoers. He didn't preserve other than 8 persons. He destroyed all. After this, he multiplied them, and they filled earth. They shared the inheritance of their father Adam. But Noah swore an oath with the Lord. They swore an oath with the Lord, lest the Lord again destroy earth in destruction water, and lest Noah's children eat what was deceased, nor what lodged dead, lest they worship different idols other than the Lord who created them, and that he might be a love father for them, and lest he destroy them at one time in their vain sin, and lest he prevent from them the first and the spring rains, and that he might give for livestock and for persons, and their food at each time, that he might give them the grass and the grain, fruit and plants, and that they might work goodly works in all that the Lord loves. And after he gave them this order, the children of Israel saddened the Lord by their sin. They didn't live firmly in his law, like unto their fathers Isaac and Abraham and Jacob, who didn't demolish their Creator, the Lord's law. And beginning with the small up to the great, those children of Israel who didn't keep the Lord's law are crooked in their work. And whether they be the priests or their chiefs or their scribes, everyone demolishes the Lord's law. They don't live firmly in the Lord's order and his law that Moses commanded them in Deuteronomy, saying, Love thy Creator the Lord in thy complete body and thy complete reasoning. They aren't firm in the Lord's order and his law that Moses commanded them in the book where the law was written, saying, Love thy companion like unto thy body, and don't worship his idols that were different, and don't go to a youth's wife, don't kill a soul, don't steal, and don't witness in a lie, and be it as his donkey or be it his ox. Don't love thy neighbor's money, nor all that thy brother brought. However, after he commanded them all this, the children of Israel who were evil returned to treachery and sin, robbery and iniquity, to a youth's wife, and to lies and stealing, and worshipping idols. The children of Israel saddened the Lord upon Horeb by working a cow who grazes toward grass. They bowed, saying, Behold, these are our creators, who sent us forth from Egypt. And they were joyous in their work of their hands. If they ate and drank and were satisfied, they arose to sing. As the Lord has told him, saying, Thy kindreds, whom thou sent forth from Egypt country, where rulership is, they have proceeded from the law and wronged, and they worked a cow's image and bowed to the idol. Consequently Moses was vexed, and alighted from the mountain of Sinai. While Moses was vexed against his kindreds, he alighted with his confidant Joshua. And at that time Joshua heard, he said, Behold, I hear the voice of warriors in Israel's camp. And Moses told Joshua, It is when Israel plays, having drunk the unboiled wine. Yet as for a warrior's voice, it is not. And he alighted and broke their image, and totally crushed it until it was like unto dust. he mixed it within the water that the children of Israel drink beside the mountain. And after this he commanded the priests that they might slay one another because of the sin they worked before the Lord. They knew that defying the Lord surpassed killing them and killing their fathers, and they did like he commanded them. And Moses told them, "Because you saddened the Lord, who fed you and cherished you, and who sent you forth from a house of rulership, and who bequeathed to you the inheritance that he swore to your fathers that he might give to them and their children after them. Because of this thing you made the Lord joyful." For they went toward sin and evil things, and they didn't quit saddening the Lord there. They aren't like unto their fathers Isaac and Abraham and Jacob, who made the Lord joyful with their goodly works, that he might give them what is on earth, and what he prepared for persons who love him in heaven, beginning from their infancy until their youth, and until their age. They aren't like unto Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, who made him joyful with their works, that he might give them a land of inheritance, where happiness and joy are found in this world, and a garden that makes joyful, prepared for kind persons in the hereafter world, what he prepared for Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, who made the Lord joyful when they were in life, and who loves him, whom an eye didn't see, nor an ear hear, and who isn't thought of in a reasoning, and their children, who denied the Lord, and were evil, and who lived formerly in the will of their reasonings. They didn't hear the command of the Lord, who fed them and cherished them and kept them, beginning from their infancy. They didn't think of the Lord, who sent them forth from the land of Egypt, and saved them from brickwork and a firm rulership. But they totally saddened him, and he would arouse peoples in their area against them, and they would arise on them in enmity, and also tax them like they wished. And at the time persons of Midian arose against them in enmity, and aroused their armies against Israel, that they might fight them, and their king's name is called Acrandis. He quickly gathered many armies in Cilicia, and Syria, and Damascus, and camping beyond the Jordan, he sent messengers, saying, "That I might capture your money also, pay tax to Israel for me." He told them, "But if you don't pay tax, I came that I might punish you, and might capture your livestock, and take your mares, and capture your children. I will capture and take you to the country you don't know, and there I'll make you pourers of water and collectors of wood." He told them, "Don't boast while you said, 'We are the Lord's kindreds, and there is nothing able for us.' Isn't it the Lord who sent me that I might destroy you and plunder your money? And am I not whom the Lord sent, that I might gather all your kindreds? Is there really a saving that their different idols saved the other parties that I destroyed? I captured their mares and their horses, and I killed them, and captured their children. And unless you introduce the tax that I commanded you, I will destroy you like unto them," he said. And he crossed the Jordan, that he might plunder their livestock and their money, and capture the wives. And after this the children of Israel wept a firm mourning to the Lord, and they totally cried. However, they lacked one who would help them. And consequently the Lord gave firmness to 3 brethren, and their names are like unto this, and they are Judah, and Maccabias, and Maccabias, whose features were handsome, and who were warriors in their power. And the children of Israel totally wept there. And at the time they heard, it saddened them in their hearts, arising from all shouts of the children of Israel, the orphans and widows, and their officials and their priests, and all the kindred of Israel, both women and males, and all children, would weep, sprinkling ashes on their heads, and their nobles had worn sackcloth. But those brethren, who were attractive and comely, went and agreed that they might save them. They counseled, saying, "Let us go and give our bodies to death because of these persons." Telling one another, take heart, they went girding their swords upon their waists, and seizing their spears in their hands, and they went prepared that they might confront the warrior, and they reached their camp. Maccabias attacked the warrior, the king, when he had sat at a dinner table. He cut his neck in one blow when food was in his mouth. And Maccabias and Judah struck the armies on the king's left and right with swords and killed them. And at the time their king was defeated, they entered into their spears in their companion's heart, and they all totally fled, and their bows were broken, and they were defeated. But those brethren who were attractive and comely were saved from death. There was no evil thing that found them. But as the Lord had returned chastisement to them, they sliced up one another and were depleted. They were defeated and died, and they crossed the Jordan, and up until they crossed, they cast away all their money, and all their money remained. And at the time the children of Israel saw that their enemies fled, they went to their camp, and took both what they plundered and their money for themselves. The Lord saved Israel, doing thus by the hand of the brethren and Maccabias. Israel sat a few days, while they made the Lord joyful. But after that, they again returned to their sin. The children of Israel neglected worshiping Lord by what is due. And he shall again sadden them by kins who don't know them, and who will gather their field crops, and destroy their grape places, and plunder their flocks, and slaughter and feed them their livestock before them, and who will capture their wives and their daughters and their sons. Because it happened that they always saddened the Lord, as they are kindreds who demolished the law, they will hammer their children before them on each of their heads. They won't save them. They who do this are Tyre and Sidon, and they who live beyond Jordan river, and the sea's edge, Haran and Gilead, Jebus and Canaan, Edom and Gergesa, and Amalek persons. All peoples do thus, who live firmed up in each of their tribes and countries and regions, and each of their works and country languages, and all live firmed up like the Lord worked them. And there are persons from them who know the Lord, and whose works were beautiful. And there are persons from them whose works were evil, and who don't know the Lord who created them. And like they worked sin, he ruled them in Syria's king Shalmaneser's hand, as he plundered and took Damascus's money, and as he shared Samaria's loot that is before the king of Egypt. He ruled them in Shalmaneser's hand. The region of Gilboa, and also persons in Persia and Media, Cappadocia and Susigia, who live in the west mountains, in the fortress of Gilead, and in Phastos, that is part of the land of Judah. These are also who live in their region, and they are kindreds who don't know the Lord, nor keep his command, and whose collars of reasoning were firm. And he shall pay them their hardship, like unto the evil of their work, and their work of their hands. For Gilead kindreds, and Caesarea region, and Amalek have become one there, that they might destroy the Lord's country, that was filled of a thing of truth, and within each Israel's creators is praised, he who is most glorified in conquering, and whom angels, who are very many in chariots of cherubim, they who stand before him, serve, fearing and trembling, and he shall pay them their hardship, like unto the evil of their work, and the work of their hands. Persons of Amalek and Edom don't worship the Lord, by whose authority earth's and heaven's rulership was seized, as they are criminals who don't live firmly in a work of truth. They don't fear to demolish his lodging, the temple. And there is no fearing the Lord before them, apart from shedding blood and adultery and eating what is beaten and sacrificed to idols, and all that resembles what lodged dead. And these are scorned sinners. They have no virtue nor religion, as they are who hated goodly work, and as they don't know the Lord, and as they don't know a work of love, aside from robbing a person's money and from sin, and aside from disturbing persons and all hated works, aside from games and songs like their father Diablos taught them, they have no virtue nor religion. As he has ruled them with his host demons, he teaches them all evil works, that were for each of themselves, all robbery and sin, theft and falsehood, robbing money, and eating what is beaten, and what lodged dead, and adultery work. He teaches them all that resembles this, and going toward a youth's wife, and shedding blood, eating what is sacrificed to idols, and what lodged dead, and killing a person's soul in violence, and envy, and winking, and greed, and all evil works that the Lord doesn't love. Diabolos, who is their enemy, teaches them this teaching, that he might distance them from the law of the Lord who rules all the world. But the Lord's work is innocence and humility, not annoying a brother, and loving a companion, harmonizing and loving with all persons. Don't be hypocrites to favor for a person's face, and don't be wrongdoers, nor totally robbers, nor persons who go toward a youth's wife, nor persons who work iniquity and evil works upon their companions, nor who cajole that they might wrong their companions in violence. They wink and shake their heads and provoke for evil. They discourage to mislead, that they might lower them to eternal definite judgment. Think that thou wilt go in death to the Lord, in whose hand are all, and thou wilt stand before him, that he might convict thee before him upon all the sin that thou worked. As they who are arrogant and evil, and powerful ones' children, who aren't stronger than they, were likewise formerly, because they saw their nature and their power, and their firm authority. They didn't put the Lord before them, and they didn't know that he was their creator who created them, bringing from non-existence into existence. And when their fathers, being like unto angels, praised upon the holy mount with angels, at the time their will misled them, they descended to this world, where definite judgment shall be done forever. As the Lord in the antiquity had created human flesh for them, that he might mislead them because of the arrogance of their reasonings, and might test them, as it were, they kept his laws and his commands. They married wives from Cain's children. But they didn't keep his law. They lowered them into Gehenna fire with their father Diabolos. For the Lord has been vexed upon the offspring of Seth, who wronged like unto persons, and persons' era diminished because of their sin. And they took Adam's children toward sin with them. He lowered them into Sheol, where they shall receive a verdict. As the era of persons has been divided because Seth's children erred by Cain's children, when a person's years were 900 in the antiquity, they returned to living 120 years. And as they are flesh and blood, the Lord said, My spirit of support won't live firmed up upon them. And consequently our era was divided. For because of our sin and our iniquity, our era has been divided from our fathers, who preceded, and when they are in their infancy again, they are dying. But our fathers' era had abounded, because they kept his law, and because they didn't sadden the Lord. But our fathers' era had abounded, because they were vexed upon their daughters, that they might teach them, and because they were vexed upon their sons, lest they demolished the Lord's law. Because they didn't demolish the Lord's law with their daughters and their sons. Consequently, the era had truly abounded. At the time Cain's children abounded, they worked drums and harps, santees and violins, and they made songs and all the games. Children who were attractive and comely were birthed for Cain from the wife of the kind man Abel, whom he killed because of her, for she was attractive. And after he killed his brother, he took that, and she who was his money. And separating from his father, he seized them, and went to the region of Caiphas, that is, to the west. And that attractive one's children were attractive like unto their mother. And consequently, Seth's children descended to Cain's children, and after they saw them, they didn't wait 1 hour, and they made the women whom they chose wives for themselves. As they have taken us into error together with them, because of their error, consequently the Lord was vexed upon us, and vexed upon them. And Diabolos, having cajoled, saying, you will become creators like unto your Creator the Lord. He took our mother Eve and our father Adam into his error, but it seeming truth to them in their dullness, they demolished the law of the Lord, he who created them, bringing from non-existence into existence, that they might bow and praise his glorified name. But he, their Creator, debased those ones, Adam and Eve, who made godhood for themselves, and he debased him who is arrogant. Like David spoke, saying, Adam perished by the sinner Diabolos, arrogance. He abused them, for our father Adam has been convicted in Diabolos's arrogance by his true judgment. And Seth's children, who erred by Cain's children, took us toward their sins thus. Consequently, our era that the Lord gave us was less than our fathers' eras. But they had worked goodly work, for they had firmed up their reasonings in the Lord. For they had taught their daughters and their sons, lest they depart from the Lord's law, that they taught them. And there was no evil enemy who approached them. But if they worked goodly work, there is nothing that benefits them, if they didn't tell nor teach their children. Like David spoke, saying, They didn't hide from their children, from one another child, and teach the praise of the Lord, the wondrous miracles he did, and his power. There is nothing that benefits them if they didn't teach to their children, that they might teach to their children to pay attention like they knew, and that they might know and do his accord, and that they might tell them the trust of the Lord's law, and that they might keep his law like unto their fathers, who made the Lord joyful with their beautiful work. And they who told them the trust from their fathers in their infancy didn't demolish his command, like their fathers learned the Lord's worship, and the 9 laws from their fathers. Their children learned from their fathers that they might work goodly work, and might present praise for their Creator, for they have kept his law, and they have loved him. And he shall hear them in their prayer, and he won't ignore their plea. But he is a forgiver. Having multiplied his wrath, he shall return it to them, and he wouldn't destroy all in his chastisement. Our brethren think, don't forget what they told you formerly, that the Lord keeps the true work of persons who work goodly work, and he multiplies their children in this world, and the invocation of their name shall live firmed up for a goodly thing until the eternity, and their children won't be troubled for grain in this world. As he shall dispute for them because of them, and as he won't cast them in the hand of the enemy, he shall save them from the hands of their enemies who hate them. And for persons who love his name, he shall be their helper in the time of tribulation. He shall guard them and pardon them all their sin. David believed in the Lord, for he had believed in him, and he saved him, being a refuge from the hand of King Saul. And as he had believed in him, and kept his law at that time when his child Absalom arose, and at the time when the Elaphans arose, and at the time when the Edomites and the Amalekites arose, at the time when the one from the 4 Rephaim arose, the Lord saved David from all this tribulation that enemies who disputed against him brought upon him. As prevailing is by the will of the Lord, they were defeated by the hand of their enemies, yet the Lord didn't save the evil kings who didn't believe in him. And Hezekiah believed in the Lord. He saved him from the hand of Sennacherib, who was arrogant. But his child Manasseh was defeated by the hand of his enemy, for he didn't put his trust in the Lord. As he didn't put his trust in the Lord, and as he didn't fear the Lord, who totally honored and famed him, they bound and took him to their country. Yet those enemies who defeated Manasseh weren't like unto him. At that time he denied him the kingdom he gave him, for he didn't work goodly work before his Creator the Lord, that his era might abound, and that he might dispute his enemy for him, and that he might have power and firmness behind and in front. For it is better to believe in the Lord than in many armies, than believing in horses and bows and shields. Believing in the Lord surpasses. A person who believed in him shall firm up and be honored and totally lofty. For the Lord doesn't favor for a face. But persons who didn't believe in the Lord, who believed in the abundance of their money, became they who departed from the grace and honor that he gave them. He shall guard the persons who believe in him, but he shall make the persons ignorant, who call him ignorant. And as they didn't discipline their reasonings to follow the Lord, nor keep his law, he won't quickly help them in their time of tribulation, nor in the time their enemies disputed with them. But for a person who was disciplined in worshipping the Lord and keeping his law, he shall be a refuge in his time of tribulation, by destroying his enemy, and by plundering his enemy's livestock, and by capturing his enemy's country persons, and by raining yearly rain, and by growing sprouts, and by introducing the piles of grain in the plant fruit, and by raining the first and the spring rains, and by making the grass verdant, and by giving the rain that rains at each time, that thy kindred beneath thy authority shall be joyful. He shall make him joyful. He shall make him joyful that they might eat the money of the other ones, that they might be satisfied, having eaten the money they plundered from their enemy, that they might plunder animals and sheep and cows, and they might eat the dinner table of the other ones, and that they might take their enemies' children captive. The Lord shall do this for the person whom he loves, but he will make the person who hates him for his enemy's ransackery. And he shall bind his feet and his hands, and shall cast him in his enemy's hands, and he shall make him for the derision of his enemies. And as he has become a shedder of blood who demolished the Lord's law, he won't make him joyful in the seed of his house, and he won't be firm in the judgment time, and that he might bring the hardship to persons who work sin. He will also give persons who work evil work the hardship of their sin. But it was commanded from alongside the Lord to give persons who work goodly work their reward, that he might keep them in his authority. For he is empowered upon all the creation he created, that he might do goodly work, and might give them eternal welfare, and that he might praise the Lord who created them. And he commanded that he keep his law. Apart from only man, there is none from the creations he created that departed from his command. Like the Lord commanded all who live firmly in each of their works, they all know and are kept in his law. But man is emboldened against the Lord, who crowned all with each of their inventions, over animal and beasts and birds of heaven. Be it what is in the sea or upon the land, the Lord gave all the creation he created to their father Adam. The Lord gave them that he might do what he loved, and that he might eat them, like unto grass that grows on the earth, and that they might rule and tax them, and that, be they beasts or animals, they might be commanded for man. And he appointed them over all he created, that persons who reigned might be commanded for the Lord, who gave them honor, and that they might favor him. But if they depart from his law, he will separate them from the lordship he gave them. As he is who rules the earth and heaven, he will give it to him who does his will. He appoints whom he wished to appoint, but he dismisses whom he wished to dismiss. He kills, he saves. He whips in tribulation, he forgives. There is no creator like unto him, as he is ruler for all the creation he created, as there is no other without him, the Creator, in heaven above earth, nor on earth beneath heaven. There is none who shall criticize him. He appoints, he dismisses, he kills, he saves. He whips in tribulation. He forgives. He impoverishes. He honors. He hears persons who beg him in their pleas. He accepts the plea of a person who does his will with a clean reasoning. And he hears them in their prayers. And he does their accord for them in all that they begged him. And he makes the great and the small to be commanded for them. As this is their money on hills and mountains, and at roots of trees, and in caves and earth wells, and all their kindreds on both dry land and sea, and for persons who do their Creator's will, and all this is their money, and he won't trouble them from their plenty, and he shall give them the reward of their praise. And he shall give them the honor he prepared in heaven for their fathers, Isaac and Abraham and Jacob. He shall give them what he prepared for Hezekiah and David and Samuel, who didn't depart from his law and his commands, that they might be joyful in his lordship. He shall give them who served him beginning from antiquity the honor he prepared for their fathers, Isaac and Abraham and Jacob, for whom he swore to give them an inheritance. Please think of the names of persons who work goodly work, and don't forget their work. Straighten up, that thy name be called like unto their name, that thou might be joyful with them in the kingdom of heaven, that was a lodging of light, that he prepared for nobles and kings who did the Lord's will, and were kind persons. And again, know and be convinced of evil nobles and kings' names, that he shall convict them, and revile them alongside man after they died. For they didn't line up their works while they saw and heard, and know and be convinced that unless they did the Lord's will, he shall judge against them in the kingdom of heaven more than criminals and persons who forgot the Lord's law. Be kindly, innocent, honest, yet don't thou also go on the path of persons who forgot the Lord's law, against whom the Lord was vexed because of their evil work. Judge truth, and save the child whose mother and father died on him, and the widow from the hands of sinners who rob them. Be a guardian like unto his father, for the child whose mother and father died on him, that thou might save him from the hand of the wealthy ones who robs him. And stand for him, and be alarmed at the time the orphan's tears flowed before thee, lest thou be alarmed in a sea of fire, where sinners who didn't enter repentance are punished. And straighten up thy feet toward the path of love and unity. As the Lord's eyes look to his friends, and as his ears hear their pleas, seek love and follow her. But the Lord's face of his wrath is towards persons who work evil work, that he might destroy the invocation of their names from this world. And he won't preserve a person who nears upon ramparts nor mountains. As I am the Lord, who am jealous upon my godhood, as I am a creator who revenges and destroys persons who hate me and don't keep my word, I won't return my face of support, reaching until I destroy the person who doesn't keep my word, and I shall honor persons who honor me and keep my word. Don't live firmed up in the order of Cain, who killed his brother who followed him in innocence, it seeming to him that his brother loved him. And he killed his brother envying over a woman. Persons who make envy and iniquity and betrayal against their companions are like unto him. But as Abel is innocent like unto a sheep, and as his blood is like unto the blood of the clean sheep that they sacrificed to the Lord with a clean reasoning, they went upon Cain's path that isn't upon Abel's path. For because all the persons who live in innocence were persons whom the Lord loves, like unto a kind man, Abel, they have been innocent, like unto Abel. But those persons who live firmed up in Abel's work love the Lord. But the Lord neglects evil ones, and their definite judgment makes application for them over their bodies. And it is written on the record of their reasonings, and at the time when judgment is judged, they shall read it before man and angels, and before all creation. At that time they shall shame. Wrongdoers and refusers who didn't do the Lord's will shall shame. And an alarming word shall be given to them that says, place them in Gehenna, where there are no exits until eternity. But at the time Gideon trusted the Lord, he defeated uncircumcised peoples, armies who were very many in an army of a few, tens of thousands, and without number like unto locusts. As there is no creator without me, O nobles and kings, don't believe in the different idols. As I am your creator, the Lord, who sent you forth from your mother's wombs, and raised you, and fed you, and clothed you, why do you pretext? How about why do you worship other idols without me? I did all this for you. Why did you give me? It is that you might live firmed up in my law, and my order, and my commands, that I might give you your body's welfare. Yet what will I want from you? The Lord who rules all said thus, he said, save yourselves from worshipping idols, and practicing sorcery, and discouraging pessimism. As the Lord's chastisement shall come upon these who do this, and upon them who hear them, and do their accord, and are their friends, and who live firmly in their command. Save yourselves from worshipping idols. As peoples who don't know you, and aren't nice to you, shall arise against you. Unless you who feared did the will of the Lord, they will eat the money wherefore you wearied. Like his servants the prophets spoke, and like Enoch spoke, and like Asaph spoke. Unless you did the Lord's will, they will eat the money wherefore you wearied. Evil persons will come, having changed their clothes, he said. There is no other law alongside them, apart from eating and drinking, and adorning in silver and gold, and living having firmed in sin. All the works of the Lord doesn't love. But they are prepared to go to drink and food, after they were aroused from their slumber, beginning from morning until evening. They go to evil work. There is misery and tribulation in their path. Yet their feet have no path of love, and they don't know works of love and unity. And there is no fearing the Lord in their faces. They are crooked evil ones, without religion nor virtue. They are greedy ones, who eat and drink alone. They are drunkards, and their sin is without the law and without measure. They are who go seducing, shedding blood, theft and perfidy, and violently robbing the money of him who doesn't have it. And they are who criticize without love and without the law, for they don't fear the Lord who created them. And there is no fear in their faces. They don't show respect in the face of the person that they see, and they don't respect a gray-haired, nor an elder's face. At the time they heard when they said, and there is money in this world, they make it their own money before they see with their eyes. For there is no fearing the Lord in their faces, and at the time they see with their eyes, it seems to them that they ate it. And their nobles eat a trust money. They are who eat, as they are negativists, and as there is no straight thing in their tongues. They don't repeat in the evening what they spoke in the morning. For they ignore the cries of sufferers and poor ones, and their kings hasten for evil. They who disturb a person, he having saved refugees from the hands of wealthy ones who rob them. Let them save him who was wronged, and the refugee. Yet let the kings not be they who begrudge justice because of this thing. But they are who exact tribute. They are who rob a person's money, and they are criminals. And as their work is evil, they aren't nice when they eat the newborn calf with their mother, and a bird with their egg. They make all they saw and heard with their own money. They love that they might gather for themselves, Yet they aren't nice to sick and poor ones. And they violently rob the money of a person who doesn't have it. And they gather all they found, that they might be fattened and be joyous in it. For they shall perish quickly, like unto a scarab that proceeded from its pit, and whose track isn't found, and that it doesn't return to its house, and because they didn't work goodly works when they are in their lives. Woe to their bodies at the time the Lord was vexed and seized them. At the time the Lord neglected them, they will perish at one time, like they are in one chastisement. For he endures them, meaning as it were they return to repentance. Yet he doesn't quickly destroy them, and they shall perish at the time when they shall perish. But if they don't return to repentance, he will quickly destroy them, like unto former persons who were preceding them, who didn't keep the Lord's law by what is due. They are who eat a person's flesh and drink a person's blood. As they gird and work violence to go to sin, there is no fearing the Lord in their faces at any time. And after they arose from their bedding, they don't rest to work sin. And their work is drink and food, going towards destruction and sin, that they might destroy many persons' bodies in this world. As their work is crooked, and as all are who live firmly in Satan's misleading works, the Lord who rules all said, Woe to your body at the time I was vexed and seized her. But they don't know the Lord's work, for they have returned it to their rear, and they have neglected my law. And later, in the era of fulfillment, I will bring the hardship upon them like unto the measure of their evil. Like their sin was written alongside me, I shall revenge and destroy them on the day when judgment is judged. And I, the Lord, am full from horizon up to horizon, and as all the creation has been seized in my authority, there is none who escapes from my authority in heaven nor earth, nor depth nor sea. I command a snake that is beneath earth, and I command a fish that is within the sea, and I command birds in heaven, and I command the desert donkey in the wilderness, for it is my money beginning from horizon up to horizon. As I am who works wondrous works, and does miracles before me, there is none who escapes from my authority on earth, nor in heaven. There is none who tells me, Where do thou go? How about what do thou work? And I command upon angels, chiefs, and hosts. All creations, whose names are called, are my money, and beasts in the wilderness, and all birds in heaven, and livestock are my monies. It arises from the wind of the south, and becomes firm in drought in the east. Later in the fulfillment era, the Red Sea shall perish being heard, arising from the being feared, and the famousness of the Lord, who should come to her. For he rules them who died, and persons who are there, and she shall perish, being heard with the limits of Saba and Nubia, and India, and Ethiopia, and all their regions. And he watches, all in lofty authority and innocence, for his authority surpasses all the authority, and he keeps congregations in his authority. And his authority firms up more than all the authority, and his kingdom surpasses all the kingdoms, and his authority is what rules all the world. For he is able for all, and there is nothing that fails him. He rules all clouds in heaven. He grows grass for livestock on earth, and he gives fruit upon the buds. He feeds for all in each of the kinds like he wishes. He feeds all that he created with each of the fruits and each of the foods, and he feeds ants and locusts beneath earth, and livestock on earth, and beasts. And for a person who prayed, he gives him his prayer, and he doesn't ignore the plea of the orphan nor widows. As the rebellion of evil persons is like unto a swirling wind, and wrongdoers' counsel like unto misty urine, he shall rather accept the plea of them who beg toward him at each time, and clean ones. And as their body is like unto a flying bird, and as the comeliness of their features that are silver and gold is perishable in this world, examination will benefit persons who forgot the Lord's law, yet not their gold, and moths shall eat their clothes. And weevils shall totally eat the wheat, and the barley's fatness, and all shall pass, like unto the day that passed yesterday. And like a word that proceeded from a mouth doesn't return, sinners' money also is like unto it, and their beautiful lifestyle is like unto a passing shadow. Sinners' money before the Lord is like unto clothes of lies. But if kind persons are honored, the Lord won't ignore them, for they have been honored while they were nice to poor ones, and they hear justice of sufferers and orphans. The Lord won't ignore them, for without neglecting the children of their house, they honor him while they clothe the naked from the clothes the Lord gave them, that they might give to the refugee sufferer. They don't favor loyal persons' judgment, and they don't make a hireling's salary lodge. As the Lord's thing is truth, and honored like unto a sword, whose mouths were two. They won't do iniquity in the number of their seasons, and in the measurement of their balance. But poor ones will think again on their bedding. But if wealthy ones don't accept them, they will be like unto dry wood that has no verdure, and a root won't be fertile from alongside where no moisture is, and the leaf won't be fertile if there is no root. As a leaf serves a flower to be an ornament for fruit, unless the leaf were fertile, it won't bear fruit. As man's fulfillment is religion, a person without religion has no virtue. If he firmed up religion, he worked virtue. And the Lord rejoices in a person who works truth and straight works. And for the person who begged him, he shall give him his plea and his tongue's reward. And he won't wrong the person who, because of his true work, that he worked. As the Lord is true, and as he loved a thing of truth, he won't justify the sinner without repentance, because of the evil of the works he worked. And as all persons' souls have been seized in his authority, because he is who rules earth and heaven, as he won't favor for the wealthy more than the poor in judgment time, he won't justify him without repentance. He created having brought all the world from non-existence into existence, and he totally prepared hills and mountains, and he firmed up earth upon water, and lest the sea be shaken. He delineated it with sand, for in his first word the Lord has said, "Let light be created." Light was created when this world had been covered in darkness. The Lord created all the creation, and he prepared this world, and he firmed up this world by what is due and by money that is straight. He said, "Let evening be dark." And again the Lord said, "Let light be created." It dawned, and there was light. And he elevated the upper water to heaven. And he stretched it forth like unto a tent, and he firmed it up with a wind. And he placed the lower water within a pit. And he shut the lock of the sea with sand, and in his authority he made them firm, lest they drown in water. And he placed animals and beasts within it, and he placed within it Leviathan and Behemoth, who were great beasts. And he placed within it the beasts without number, seen and unseen. On the third day the Lord created plants on earth, all the roots and woods and fruits that bear forth in each of their kinds, and a welfare wood, beautiful for them to see it. And he created a welfare wood that was both beautiful for them to see it, and sweet for them to eat it. And he created grass, and all plants whose seeds are found from within them, to be food for birds and livestock and beasts. It dusked and dawned, and on the fourth day he said, "Let lights be created in heaven, called cosmos." The Lord, having created moon and sun and stars, he placed them in heaven, called cosmos, that they might shine in this world, and that they might feed them daylight and night. And after this, moon and sun and stars alternated in night and daylight. And on the 5th day the Lord created all animals and beasts that live within water, and all birds that fly in heaven, all that is seen and unseen, all this. And on the 6th day he created livestock, and beasts, and others, and having created and prepared all, he created Adam in his example and his appearance. He gave him all animals and beasts he created, that he might reign over them, and again all animals and beasts, and all fishes, and Leviathan and Behemoth that are in the sea. And he gave him all cows that live in this world, and sheep, the animals unseen, and them that are seen. And he placed in the garden Adam, who he created in his example and his appearance, that he might eat and might cultivate plants, and might praise the Lord there. And lest he demolish his command, he had said, At the time when you ate from this herb of fig, you will die a death. And he commanded him, lest he eat from the fig of herb that brings death, that draws attention to evil and good, that brings death. Our mother Eve was cajoled by a snake's misleading, and she ate from that herb of fig, and gave it to our father Adam. And Adam, having eaten from that herb of fig, brought death upon his children and upon himself, as he had demolished his command, and as he had eaten from the herb of fig that the Lord commanded, saying, Don't eat from it. The Lord was vexed against our father Adam, and expelled and sent him away from the garden. And he gave him that earth that grows thistles and thorns, that he cursed because of him at the time he demolished his command, that he might eat the reward of his weariness, having toiled and labored, that he might plow it. And at the time the Lord sent him forth to his land, Adam returned to complete sadness, and having toiled and labored, that he might plow earth, he began to eat in weariness, and also in struggles. And after his children lived, having abounded, there were from them some who praise and honor the Lord, and don't demolish his command. There were prophets who spoke what was done, and what will be done henceforth. And from his children there were sinners, who speak lies, and who wrong persons. Adam's firstborn child became evil, and killed his brother Abel. The Lord judged judgment against Cain, because he killed his brother Abel. And the Lord was vexed against earth, because she drank his blood. And the Lord told Cain, Where is thy brother Abel? And Cain, in the arrogance of his heart, said, Am I my brother Abel's keeper? Abel became a clean man, but Cain became a sinner man by killing a kind man, his brother Abel. Again, a kind child, Seth, was birthed. Adam birthed 60 children. There are kind persons and evil persons from them. And there are kind persons from them. And there are persons who were prophets, and who were traitors and sinners. There are blessed persons who were kind persons, who, fulfilling the accord of the father Adam, and all he told to his child Seth, beginning from Adam, until Noah, who was a kind man who kept the Lord's law. And he sanctioned the Lord's law to his children. He told them, Guard, lest they demolish the Lord's law, and that they might tell their children like their father Noah told them, and that they might keep the Lord's law. And they lived while they taught their children, persons born after them. But Satan lived when he spoke to their fathers, having lodged in idols that reached to a grave, and that have vows on them, and having defeated the persons who told them all right. And when they did all that Satan, who is a teacher of sin, commanded them. And they lived when they worshipped the idols like unto their order, until a kind man, Abraham, who fulfilled the Lord's will. For he had lived firmly in the law beforehand, separated from his cousins, and the Lord swore an oath with him, having lodged in wind and fire. The Lord swore to him that he might give a land of inheritance, and that he might give him children until the eternity. And he swore to Isaac like unto him, that he might give him his father Abraham's inheritance, and he swore to Jacob that he might give him his father's inheritance. He swore to him like unto Isaac, and he separated their children who were birthed after them from Jacob, from the 12 tribes of Israel, and made them priests and kings. He blessed them, saying, Abound, and totally be very many. And he gave them the inheritance of their father. However, while he fed them and loved them, they didn't quit saddening the Lord in all. And at the time he destroys them, at that time they will seek him in worship, and they will return from sin, and go to the Lord, for he loves them, and the Lord shall pardon them. For being nice to all he created, he shall pardon them, and it is because of their Father's work that he loves them. Yet it isn't because of their own works. And he stretches forth his right hand in plenty, that he might satisfy a hungry body, and he reveals his eye for pardoning, that he might multiply grain for food. He gives food to crows' chicks, and to beasts that beg him. At the time they cry to him, he will save the children of Israel from the hands of their enemies, who delayed from the time. And they will return to sin again, that they might sadden him, and he will arouse their enemies, peoples in their area, against them. He will destroy them, and kill them, and capture them. And again they will shout to the Lord in mourning and sadness. And there is the time when he sent help and saved them by the hands of prophets. And there is the time when he saved them by the hands of princes. And at the time they saddened the Lord, their enemies taxed them and captured them. And David arose and saved them from the Eliphan's hands. And again they saddened the Lord, and the Lord aroused against them peoples who worry them. And there is the time when he saved them by the hand of Jephthah, and again they forgot the Lord who saved them in their time of tribulation. As the Lord has brought the hardship upon them, he will arouse against them enemies who are evil, who will make tribulation firm over them and totally capture them. And at the time them were worried by tribulation, they were seized, and again cried to him, and he saved them by the hand of Gideon. And again they saddened the Lord with their works of their hands. And again he aroused against them peoples who make tribulation firm over them. And they returned and wept and cried to the Lord. And again he saved them from the peoples by the hand of Samson. And they rested a little from the tribulation. And they arose that they might sadden the Lord with their former sin. And again he aroused against them other peoples who worried them. And again they cried and wept to the Lord, that he might send help for them. And he saved them from the peoples by the hands of Barak and Deborah. Again they lived a little season while they worshipped the Lord. And again they forgot the Lord in their former sin, and saddened him. And he aroused against them other peoples who worried them. And again he saved them by the hand of Judith. And having sat again a little season, they arose that they might sadden the Lord with their sin, like unto formerly. And he aroused against them peoples who ruled them, and they cried and wept to the Lord. For he had struck on his head Abimelech, who was a warrior, who came that he might fight the country of Judah. And he saved them by the children in the area, and by Mattathiah's hand. And at the time that warrior died, his army fled and was scattered. And the children of Israel followed and fought them up to the Jabbok, and they didn't preserve even one person from them. After this they waited a little, and arose that they might sadden the Lord. And he aroused against them peoples who ruled them. And again they totally cried to the Lord, and the Lord ignored their crying and their mourning. For they have saddened the Lord every time, and they have demolished his law. And they captured and took them, with their priests, to Babylon, Persian's country. And then the children of Israel, who were traitors, didn't quit saddening the Lord while they worked sin and worshipped idols. The Lord was vexed that he might destroy them at one time in their sin. Haman, having introduced 10,000 gold pieces into the king's box, on the day when it was known, he lodged anger in the king Artaxerxes' reasoning, lest he preserve their children in the country of Persia, beginning from India and as far as Ethiopia, at the time he told them that he might destroy them. He did thus, and he wrote a letter where a message was written in the king's authority, and he gave him a seal in his hand, that he might deliver to the country of Persia. He gave him a seal that he might destroy them in one day when he wished to destroy them, like the king commanded. But he commanded that he might introduce their money, the gold and the silver, into the king's box. And at the time the children of Israel heard this thing, they totally cried and wept to the Lord. And they told it to Mordecai, and Mordecai told Esther. And Esther said, Fast, beg, and all the kindreds of the children of Israel, cry to the Lord in the places where you are. And Mordecai wore sackcloth, and sprinkled dust on himself. And the children of Israel fasted, begged, and entered repentance in the country where they were. And Esther was totally sad, and being a queen, she wore sackcloth. She sprinkled dust, and shaved her head, and she didn't anoint perfume like queens of Persia anoint perfume. And in the deep reasoning she cried and wept to her father's Creator the Lord. And consequently he gave her to be beloved alongside Persia's king Artaxerxes. And she made a kind lunch for her father's Creator. And Haman and the king entered to the lunch that Esther prepared. And like he wished that he might do upon Mordecai, the Lord paid the hardship on that Haman, and they hanged him on a tall wood. The king's letter was commanded that he might quit Israel like they were, in all their accord, unless they tax them, nor rob them, nor wrong them, nor take their money on them. As the Lord shall pardon Israel doing thus, at the time they cried entering repentance. It is that they might love them and honor them in the country of Persia where they lived. Yet a king's letter was commanded lest they destroy their country nor plunder their livestock. And at the time they sadden him, he will arouse against them peoples who worry them. At that time they will totally weep and cry that he might send help for them, that he might save them from the hands of peoples who make tribulation firm on them. And at the time Egypt's persons also made the children of Israel work, by making them work bricks in difficulty. And at the time they worried them all the work, by kicking mud without straw, and heating bricks. And at the time they made them work, having appointed chiefs over them, who rush workers. They cried to the Lord, that he might save them from working all Egypt's bricks. At that time he sent them, Aaron and Moses, who helped them. For the Lord had sent them that they might send forth his kindreds from Pharaoh's house of rulership, and he saved them from brickwork, because in his arrogance he refused to adjourn Israel, lest they be ruled and sacrifice sacrifices to the Lord in the wilderness. The Lord had sent them that they might send forth his kindreds, Israel, from Egypt's king Pharaoh's house of rulership, and they saved them. For the Lord neglects arrogant ones, and he drowned Pharaoh in the Red Sea with his army because of his arrogance. And like unto him, he shall destroy them who didn't work goodly work in all the kingdoms that he appointed and crowned them, that they who ignore the Lord's word when they are nobles and kings might fulfill his will for him, and that they might give persons who serve in a goodly thing their wage, and that they might honor his famous name. The Lord who rules all said, But if they straighten up my kingdom, I will straighten up their kingdom for them. Work goodly work for me, and I shall work goodly work for you. Keep my law, and I shall keep you your bodies. Live firmed up in my law, and I shall live lodging honesty in you like unto your reasoning. Love me, and I shall love your welfare. Near toward me, and I shall heal you. The Lord who rules all said, Believe in me, and I shall save you from the tribulation. Don't live side by side, as the Lord who rules all loves straight work. He said, You approach toward me, and I shall approach toward you. You persons who are sinners and traitors, cleanse your hands from sin, and distance your reasonings from evil. And I shall distance your anger from you, and I shall return to you in charity and forgiveness. I shall distance criminals and enemies who work iniquity from you, like I saved my slave David from his enemies who met him, from their great malice, and from the hand of Goliath, who was a warrior, and also from the hand of Saul, who sought that he might kill him, and from the hand of his child Absalom, who loved that he might take his kingdom. I shall save persons who keep my law and fulfill my will, like unto him. I shall bequeath them honor, and they shall be joyful in the present world, and yonder in the world that shall come. I shall crown them upon all, that they might be joyful. They shall be one with kings who served the Lord, and were honored in their beautiful way of life, like the prophet Samuel served him in his beautiful way of life, beginning from his infancy, whom the Lord, he being the law, chose. He told him that he might tell Eli, who was a servant elder. And when he served in the Lord's lodging, the temple, Samuel's work also was merciful and beloved. And at the time he grew, when he served in the Lord's lodging, the temple, he made him to be appointed and anointed, that he might appoint his people, and that kings might be anointed by the Lord's will. And the Lord had loved him, that the kindred he chose from the children of Israel might be appointed. At the time he fulfilled the will of the Lord who created him, he gave him the anointing of the kingdom in his hand. And when Saul was in his kingdom, the Lord told his prophet Samuel, Go, and as I have loved Jesse's child David, who was birthed from Judah's kin, anoint him. I have hated Saul's kin, for he has saddened me because he violated my word. And I neglected him, for he didn't keep my law, and I won't crown from his kin again. And persons who didn't keep my law and my word and my order like unto him, I shall destroy my kingdom, and my gifts from their children unto eternity. And as they didn't magnify me at the time I magnified them, I shall destroy them, yet I won't again return to lift them up. Though I honored them as they didn't honor me, I won't magnify them. For they didn't do a goodly thing for me at the time I did a goodly thing for them, and they didn't forgive me at the time I forgave them. And as they didn't make me a ruler at the time I made rulers over all, as they didn't honor me at the time I honored them more than all, I won't magnify them again nor honor them, for neither did they keep my law. And I withheld the gifts I gave them, and I won't return the money I withheld from them, like unto the measure I was vexed and sore. The Lord who rules all said thus, He said, I shall honor them who honored me, and love them who loved me. I shall separate them who didn't honor me, nor keep my law from the gifts I gave them. The Lord who rules all said, I love them who loved me, and magnify him who magnifies me. He said, As I, the Lord, am who rules all, there is none who escapes my authority in earth nor heaven, for I am the Lord who wills, and who saves, and who saddens, and who forgives. As famousness and honor are my money, I honor him who I loved. For I am who judges and who revenges and destroys, and I make wretched him whom I hated. I am who forgives them who loves me and calls my name every time. I am who feeds food for the wealthy and the poor. I am who feeds birds and animals, fishes in the sea, and beasts and flowers. Yet I am not who feeds only man. I feed crocodiles and whales, gophers and hippos, and badgers, and all that lives within water, all that flies on wind. Yet I am not who feeds only man. All this is my money. I am who feeds all that seek me, by all that is due and beloved. And the kings don't reign without my accord, and sufferers are by my command. Yet they aren't poor without my command, and powerful ones are by my will, yet they aren't strong without my will. I gave being beloved for David, and wisdom for Solomon, and I added eras for Hezekiah. I diminished Goliath's era, and I gave power to Samson, and again I weakened his power. And I saved my slave David from the hand of Goliath, who was a warrior. And again I saved him from the king Saul's hand, and from the second warrior who disputed him. For he also had kept my command, and I saved him from the hands of persons who dispute him and fight him. And I loved him, and I love all the nobles and kings who keep my law. As they have made me joyful, I shall give them prevailing and power against their enemies. And again, that they might inherit their father's land, I shall give them the cleansed and shining land of the inheritance that I swore for their fathers. The Lord who rules all said, And you, the nobles, and also the kings, hear me in my word, and keep my commands, lest you sadden me, and worship, like the children of Israel saddened me, and worship different idols, them whom I kept and saved, when I, the Lord, am their Creator. The Lord who rules all said, Hear me in my word, and all whom I raised and loved, and fed, beginning from when they were birthed from their mothers and fathers, and whom I sent forth towards earth's crops, and whom I fed the fatness found from earth, making like unto what is due, and whom I gave the grapes vine and the oil tree fruit that they didn't plant, and the clear water wells that they didn't dig. Hear me in my word, lest you sadden me like the children of Israel saddened me, worshipping other idols, when I, the Lord, am their Creator. He told them, Who feed them in sheep milk, and the honeycomb with the hulled wheat, and who clothe them in clothes where ornaments are, and who gave them all they love, and without it being that I deprived them of all they begged me. Like David spoke, saying, The children of Israel were fed the manna that angels lowered. And again, hear me in my word, lest you sadden me like the children of Israel saddened me, worshipping the idols when I am their Creator, the Lord, who fed them sweet manna in the wilderness. He said, I did all this for them, that they might worship me by what is due and in truth. The Lord who rules all said, But they didn't worship me, and I neglected them. They saddened me, and lived firmly in the law of idols, that wasn't my law. And I shall bring the hardships upon them like unto their sin, as they have neglected my worship. And as they weren't firm in my counsel and my order, I neglected them in the measure of the sin that they worked with their hands. And I shall lower them into Gehenna in a definite judgment that is made in heaven. For they didn't keep my law, and I am vexed against them, and I shall diminish their eras in this world. If thou be a king, art thou a man who shall die and be demolished, and tomorrow who shall be worms and dust? But today thou boast and are proud like unto a man who won't die forever. The Lord who rules all said, But thou, who are seen being well today, are a man who will die tomorrow. But if you keep my commands and my word, I shall bequeath thee an honored country, with honored kings who did my will, whose lodging was light, and whose crowns were beautiful, and whose thrones were silver and gold, and whom persons who sit on them adorned. He said, And they shall be joyful within his country, that is a place that approached for persons who worked goodly work. But for persons who work sin, as they didn't keep my law, said the Lord who rules all, it isn't due them that they might enter into that country where honored kings shall enter. The kingdom of Media shall perish, but Rome's kingdom shall be totally firm upon Macedonia's kingdom, and Nineveh's kingdom shall be firm upon Persia's kingdom, and the kingdom of Ethiopia shall be firm upon Alexandria's kingdom. As peoples shall arise, Moab's kingdoms shall be firm upon Amalek's kingdom, and brothers shall rise against brother, and the Lord shall revenge and destroy, like he spoke that I might perish. Kingdom shall arise against kingdom, and the people against the people, and country against country, he said. And arguments shall be made, and there shall be battles, famine, plague, earthquakes, drought. As love has perished from this world, the Lord's chastisement descended upon it. For the day has arrived suddenly when the Lord shall come, who frightens like unto lightning that is seen from east up to west. On the day when he, the Lord, judges judgment, at that time every one shall receive his hardship like unto the weakness of his hands, and firmness of his sin. For he has said, I shall revenge them on the day when he, the Lord, judges judgment, and on the day when their feet are hindered, for the day when they are counted for destruction has arrived. At that time the Lord shall destroy in Gehenna forever persons who won't live firmed up in his law, who work sin. And they who live in the West Islands, and Nubia and India, Saba and Ethiopia and Egypt's persons, all persons who live in them, at that time shall know me, that I were the Lord who rules earth and heaven, and who gives being beloved and honor, and who saves and who kills. I am who sends forth the sun, who sends it towards its setting, who brings the evil and the good. I am who brings peoples, whom you don't know, who slaughter and eat the money whereby you wearied, your sheep and your cows' herds. And they shall capture your children while they hammer them before you, and you cannot save them. Because the Lord's spirit of support didn't lodge in you, as you didn't fear the Lord's commands that you heard. He shall destroy your lavishments and your assignments. But a person in whom the Lord's spirit of support lodged will know all, like Nebuchadnezzar told Daniel, saying, I see the Lord's spirit of support that lodged in thee. And a person in whom the Lord's spirit of support lodged will know all, and what was hidden will be revealed for him, and he will know all that was revealed and that was hidden. Yet there is nothing hidden from a person in whom the Lord's spirit of support lodged. But as we are persons who will die tomorrow, our sins that we hid and worked shall be revealed. And like they test silver and gold in a fire, like there are sinners, later on the day of Advent, they will be examined, for they didn't keep the Lord's commands. At that time, all peoples and all the children of Israel's works shall be examined. As the Lord is vexed against you, because you didn't judge a truth judgment for the orphan, woe to you, nobles of Israel! Woe to you, persons who go to a drinking house morning and evening and get drunk, who are partial in judgment, and who don't hear the widow's judgment nor the orphan, who live in sin and seducing. The Lord told Israel's nobles, saying thus, Unless you live firmed up in my commands, and kept my law, and loved what I love, woe to you, he told them. And I shall bring destruction and chastisement and tribulation upon you, and you will perish like unto what weevils and moths ate, and your tracks and your region won't be found, he told them. And your country will be a wilderness, and all persons who saw it formerly shall clap their hands. They shall marvel over it while they said, Wasn't this country filled of her plenty, and all who love it? The Lord made her thus by the sin of persons who live in her. They shall say, As she has made her heart proud, and as she has elevated herself, and as she has made her collar of reasoning firm, until the Lord made her wretched upon earth, and as she shall be a desert by the arrogance of persons who live in her, and as thorns have grown upon her with thistles, woe to her. And she grows weeds and nettles, and she became a wilderness and a desert, and beasts shall live within her. For the Lord's judgment has firmed up upon her, and she shall receive the chalice of the Lord's judgment, because of the arrogance of her reasoning and the sin of persons who live in her. And she became frightening to persons who go to her. Persons of Macedon, don't boast. As the Lord is there, who shall destroy you? Amalekites, don't make your collars of reasoning firm. For you will be lofty up to heaven, and you will descend until Gehenna. At the time Israel formally entered into the country of Egypt, in the kingdom of Moab and Media, he said, Don't boast, for it isn't due to pretend upon the Lord, that you might pretend upon him. Thou kindred of Ishmael, slave's child, why do thou make firm thy collar of reasoning? With what wasn't thy money? How about don't thou think that the Lord shall judge upon thee at the time he arose, that it might be judged upon earth on the day when it is judged upon thee? The Lord who rules all said, At that time thou wilt receive thy hardship like unto the work of thy hands. How about, why do thou elevate thy reasoning? How about, why do thou make firm thy collar of reasoning? And I shall pretend upon thee, like thou pretended upon persons who weren't thy kindreds. For thou do what thou wish, that thou might work sin, and I shall neglect thee in the place where they sent thee. The Lord who rules all said, And I shall do thus upon thee, he said. But if thou worked goodly works, and if thou love what I loved, I shall hear thee in all that thou begged. And if thou fulfill my will for me, I shall fulfill thy accord for thee. And I shall dispute thy enemies for thee, and I shall bless thy kingdom and thy seed for thee. And I shall multiply thy sheep and thy cows' herds for thee. And if thou lived firmed up in my commands, and also if thou did what I love, the Lord who rules all said, I shall bless for thee all thou seized in thy hand. But if thou don't do my will, if thou don't live firmed up in my law and my commands, all this tribulation that was told formerly shall find thee. For thou didn't endure tribulation being firm in my command, and thou didn't live firmed up in my law. And thou cannot escape from my anger, that will come upon thee every time. And as thou didn't love what I loved, when I am who created thee, bringing from non-existence into existence, all this was thy money, that thou might kill and heal, to do all that thou wished, that thou might work and demolish, that thou might honor and abuse, that thou might elevate and debase, as thou have neglected my worship and my praise, when I am who gave thee lordship, and also honor alongside persons who are beneath thy authority. Thou cannot escape from my anger that will come upon thee. And if thou did the Lord's will, and if thou lived firmed up in his commands, he will love thee, that thou might be joyful with him in his lordship, and that thou might be a partaker with persons who inherited an honored country. For he has said, If they endure me, I'll bequeath them being beloved and honor. For I shall make them joyful in the temple where prayers are prayed. For the Lord who rules all has said, And they shall be beloved and chosen like unto a sacrifice. Don't neglect to do work whereby welfare is done, and a goodly thing, that you might cross from death into life. But persons who work goodly work, the Lord shall keep them in all his goodly work, that they might be his slaves, like unto Job, whom the Lord kept from all the tribulation. The Lord shall keep them in all goodly work, that they might be his slaves for him, like unto Abraham, whom he saved at the time he killed the kings, and like unto Moses, whom he saved from the hand of Canaan, and the hand of Pharaoh, in whom Abraham lived, and who were also disturbing his body evening and morning, night and day, that they might make him worship idols. But when they took him to the idols that were their money, he would endure the tribulation while he refused. For Abraham, who believed in him beginning from his childhood, was for the Lord, he trusted his friend, and while he refused, he would worship the Lord who created him. As he totally loved the Lord, he didn't quit worshiping the Lord until he died, and he didn't depart from his law until he had died, and he taught his children that he might keep the Lord's law. And like their father Abraham kept his law, they didn't depart from the Lord's law. Like he told angels, saying, I have a friend in this world called Abraham. Abraham's children, Jacob and Isaac, who are his slaves, because of whom the Lord spoke, didn't depart from the Lord's law. The Lord, who was praised alongside them, and who rules all, said, Abraham is my friend, Isaac is my confidant, and Jacob is my friend, whom my reasoning loved. But when he totally loved the children of Israel, they lived when they continually saddened him, and he lived when he endured them, and when he fed them manna in the wilderness. Their clothes didn't age, for they have been fed manna, that is bread of knowledge, and their feet didn't awaken. But their reasonings would distance from the Lord every time, as they who work sin beginning from antiquity. They had no hope to be saved. They became like unto a crooked bow, yet they didn't become like unto their fathers Isaac and Abraham and Jacob, who served the Lord in their beautiful way of life. They would sadden him every time with their idols on the mountains and hills. They would eat on the mountains, and at the caves and tree roots. They would slaughter a steer. They would sacrifice a sacrifice, and they would be joyous in the work of their hands. They would eat the rest of the sacrifice. They would drink of the sacrifice, and they would play with demons while they sang. And demons would admire all their games and their songs for them. And they would work their drunkenness and adultery without measure, and they would do the robbery and greed that the Lord doesn't love. For Canaan's idols, and for Midian's idols, and for Baal, and Apis, and Dagon, and Serapis, and Artemides, who are Eliphales's idols, and for all idols of peoples in their area. They would sacrifice sacrifices, and all Israel would worship idols, like peoples worship idols, with the intention that they see and hear. They would make their games and their songs and their bluster that peoples make. All Israel's kindreds do likewise, who say, We will worship the Lord without keeping his commands, and his law that Moses told them in Torah, that he might keep the Lord's law, and might distance from worshipping idols. Lest they worship separate idols, apart from their father's Creator, who fed them the honey found from Maga, who fed them the plantation grain, and sent them forth to the earth's crops, and who fed them the manna. Moses commanded them, saying, Don't worship, for he is their Creator, and he feeds them who loved him, and he won't deprive them who loved him and desired him. But they didn't quit saddening the Lord, and they would sadden the Lord at the time he made them joyful. And at the time he saddened them, they would cry to him, and he would save them from the tribulation that found them. And they would again be totally joyful, and would live many eras. And at that time they would totally return their hearts to sin, that they might sadden the Lord like unto formerly, and he would arouse against them peoples in their area, that might destroy them, and they would worry and tax them. And again they would totally return and cry to their Creator the Lord, and he would forgive them. It is because of their fathers Noah, Isaac, and Abraham, and Jacob, who served the Lord in their beautiful way of life beginning from antiquity, for whom he firmed up his oath. Yet it isn't because of their own work that he forgives them. And he loved persons who kept his law, loving that they might multiply their children like unto stars of heaven and the sand of the sea. But at the time dead ones arose, that they have like unto sand of the sea, they are sinners' souls, that will separate from the children of Israel, and enter into Gehenna. As the Lord had told Abraham, See toward heaven at night, and count heaven's stars, as it were thou could count. Likewise, as he had told him, Thy children and righteous ones shall shine in heaven like unto heaven's stars. They are like unto stars that shine in heaven. But what they have are kind persons' souls, birthed from Israel. And again, as he had told him, Understand towards the river edge, and the sea, and see what is amidst the sand. Count as it were thou could count, and thy sinner children are likewise, who will descend into Gehenna at the time dead ones arose. They are sinners' souls. And Abraham believed in the Lord. Consequently, it was counted for him being truth. He found his morale in this world, and after his wife Sarai aged, she bore a child named Isaac. For he had believed that persons who worked goodly work shall rise, and go to the kingdom of heaven that lives firmed up forever, and again he shall find a kingdom in heaven. But he had believed that persons who work sin shall go into Gehenna, that lives firmed up forever. At that time dead ones arose, but that righteous ones who worked goodly work shall reign with him forever. But he had believed that it shall be judged forever in truth, without falsehood, upon persons who work sin. for he shall find the kingdom of life in heaven. May glory and praise enter for the Lord in truth, without falsehood, and the first book that speaks the Maccabeans thing was filled and fulfilled. Selah.